We just need the guy from.
Just we need him to come on.
I'm going to ask to provide a wish.
Yeah, the embodiment, yeah.
John, can you please come into the meeting?
It says, I cannot start the video because it is disabled by the host.
Hold on, we'll just get started. We're just waiting for you to come online. Tēnā koutou katoa. Good morning, everyone. We're day 3 of the Whānau Solar Hearing Limited. So we have online Mr. John Slee from the UK. So welcome, Mr. Slee. I'm not sure
Good morning.
What time are you there? 8 o'clock at night?
We're 11 hours behind you, so it's 10 o'clock at night, yes.
Right. So we have read your submission, and it's open to you now to talk to that submission, and then we may have some questions beyond that. So I'll leave that to you to do now.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for letting us represent the all-important voice of tourism. My wife and I live in the English Lake District, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, so we know all about the importance of the relationship between tourism and the natural environment. We're frequent visitors to your lovely country and are overwhelmed by the contrasting beauty of your landscapes in both islands. As regular tourists, we wish to make this statement opposing the solar farm application. We first became aware of this development when visiting the Waipara Valley in March 2024. Whilst we do not live in Waipara, as regular visitors, we were concerned about the proposal's likely impact upon tourism. We raised an objection in July 2025 on the grounds that such a large solar farm on prime agricultural land seemed inconceivable. As a retired chartered engineer, I understand the need to explore alternative forms of energy generation, including solar. But surely a more suitable brownfield or remote site could be chosen that would not have the adverse visual and potentially economic impact this proposal will have. The Waipara region is renowned for its beauty, farming and winemaking, as many people have said to this inquiry. In addition to the visual impact, the construction involving considerable earthworks would inevitably have a detrimental effect on the landscape, with destruction of habitats, disturbance to wildlife, as well as undoubtedly causing ecological damage. The inevitable glint, glare and noise of operation of the completed works would have a continuous and lasting impact. We recently visited the area again in February 2026 this year and looked in more detail at the extent and location of the proposed farm, which in our view is better described as a solar power station due to its size. The impact is even greater than we'd realised, as tourism is so important to the local economy, particularly as the wine industry struggles with reduced demand. We felt it very important that the voice of tourists is heard. In particular, we had not realised how much it would dominate the landscape along State Highway 7, which is designated as a scenic touring route. We've spent a lot of time travelling throughout New Zealand and viewing the scenery by car. This is a big part of how many people enjoy your varying topography. To have to travel 4 kilometres adjacent to an ugly solar power station on a designated scenic route is frankly inconceivable. This is not to mention the impact the solar farm would have on views from the Glenmark Railway, which is a popular tourist attraction. When you visit the site, Commissioners, we urge you to drive State Highway 7 towards Waipara to fully appreciate the adverse effect this development will have on a picturesque drive. Returning, as many people do, from the tourist honeypot of Hamner Springs, the Wecker Valley opens up as its limestone monoliths give way to the open country as you enter the Waipara Valley. The views on the left stretch across vineyards and fields over the Wecker Creek north to the sunny slopes of the Omi Mountains. Imagine if this beautiful view was obliterated by 4 kilometers of industrial landscape with a boundary fence, solar panels, inverters, switchgear, and associated servicing vehicles. I recorded our journey on this road at 70 kilometers per hour and note that the solar farm would be visible adjacent to the road for some 3.5 minutes. Once planting is established, the beautiful views across the valley would be lost forever. This is prime agricultural land where grazing sheep add to the beauty of the landscape. Surely this can't be allowed on such a picturesque alpine Pacific tourist route. Whilst the Highway Authority have now dropped their objection, as a retired highway engineer, I am still concerned about the vehicle turning movements during construction and the potential for accidents on what is a straight, fast highway. To adopt a junction design standard for a private property just seems wrong. Also, no acknowledgement is made to the distraction this development would cause to drivers, both during construction and before planting is established. I now wish to discuss the proposed landscaping plan. In submitting further details, we note the developer says planting to screen the works would take up to 5 years to reach a height of 3 meters, let alone the time it would take to reach the desired height of 5 meters. To make matters worse, it appears that planting wouldn't start until month 8 of construction, with no condition to ensure that this actually happens. How can this be right? If heaven forbid this development was approved, we would argue that planting needs to be established to the full 5-meter height before any work commences, thereby immediately reducing the effect on local properties and traffic on State Highway 7. This would also help reduce noise during construction. We understand that there have been problems getting this developer to satisfactorily complete such landscaping works on a much smaller solar farm in the North Island. In my opinion, this is another unacceptable risk. It seems to me that this application is born out of economic convenience from a speculative developer and landowner who have little regard for the beauty and long-term effect on this valley. Whilst construction work would create jobs in the short term, much more damage would be done to the local economy and businesses, as many people have said. This would not only be due to the noise and disruption during a lengthy construction period, but the long-term blight this development would cause to your beautiful landscape. This would undoubtedly impact upon the all-important $150 million annual contribution that tourism makes to your local economy. I will leave technical experts, including long-term sustainability, to technical witnesses who will no doubt argue the merits or otherwise of this new technology. However, in my opinion, there appears to be a limited lifespan and unknown carbon impact of both manufacture and ultimate disposal of such solar panels. The latter is very important, as unlike the hydroelectric projects of the last century, which have generally enhanced your local landscape, I'm thinking about Lake Tekapo and Lake Tuani, there's nothing pretty about 181 hectares of solar panels. We speak from experience of the terrible visual and economic impact similar farms have made and had in the UK. Please don't make the same mistake here. Finally, where is the certainty that Far North Solar Farms Limited will remain in business to dispose or replace the panels in 30 years' time? The risk of leaving such a blight on the landscape cannot be ignored, and it would fall to public authorities to instigate expensive legal proceedings or indeed to remove the farm at taxpayers' expense. If approved, which we very much hope this development is not, could I suggest it would be necessary for the council to require a substantial commuted sum to cover such an eventuality? In conclusion, Commissioners, I hope that I have raised enough doubts and serious questions about the suitability of this development in this location that the hearing rejects the application and that the developer seeks a more suitable alternative site elsewhere. We hereby confirm our strong objection on behalf of fellow tourists. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll just probably got a couple of questions for you, and perhaps if I can kick it off. Given that you are a tourist in this space rather than a local resident, so knowing a solar farm was in the area, would that affect your decision to visit Waipara?
I think it would definitely, yes, because when you're planning routes, we've toured many parts of your lovely country. You always look at the environment that you're travelling through, and the fact that you choose scenic routes deliberately because you know that they're going to be scenic and they're not going to be blighted by industrial development, and they're going to show off your beautiful landscape to the best advantage. So I would think certainly touring, but also the fact that we often stay in the Waipara Valley, and we would be looking onto the solar farm. We wouldn't come if that was the case, because we want the nice landscape views and the countryside and the openness that your country offers.
You mentioned in your statement there about the terrible visual and economic impact similar solar farms have had in the UK.
Yeah.
What has been that experience in the UK?
It's been wide. I mean, at the moment the current minister is very pro green energy, so therefore there's a feeling that if it gets to a ministerial level, he will almost approve anything, and that has certainly upset a lot of locals in a similar way to what has been suggested here. And generally, there's just been a feeling that, particularly in tourist areas, that we've probably gone too far, and that that we've got less land than you have, so it's probably more difficult for us to find suitable alternative sites. But I would suggest you have the luxury of land at your disposal, and surely somewhere less obtrusive could be found that would satisfy the green agenda but not spoil a beautiful landscape.
Yeah. You mentioned you come to New Zealand a lot and have travelled around. So have you travelled a lot of the country?
Yes, we have. We first came on a world cruise, actually, and we got off in New Zealand quite deliberately. So we travelled extensively to the North Island, and then across to the South Island. So we've now covered virtually the whole of both islands, and the South Island we're just blown away with. It's as I say, we live in the Lake District, but it's like the Lake District on steroids. The scenery is just absolutely fabulous, and the open space is something that we've really enjoyed.
Great. And so have you been to Taupo in the middle of the North Island?
Yes, we have, yes, yeah.
And have you travelled the road from there across to Napier?
We travelled from Rotorua to Napier.
Right, okay. So you would have gone, that's a route I think called the Thermal Explorer Highway. It's quite a scenic.
It is, that's right, yes, yeah.
Yeah, I wondered if you're aware of the large solar farm that's been consented to the side of the road there.
We weren't. It certainly wasn't there when it was 2 years ago when we visited the North Island.
Right, okay. Yeah, I just wonder if a large solar farm's been consented there on the side of the highway, would that change your view of how that road is experienced?
Yeah, I think it would. Yes, because I say when you're planning routes, you look for scenic tourist routes, and you look to maximise the beauty of things rather than an industrial landscape. You expect industrial landscapes in towns or in developed areas, but not in the middle of open country.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you very much.
I just had one other question. I found it it's quite interesting that you mentioned Lake Te Anau in your statement there. Probably New Zealand's first environmental battle back in the late 60s to actually raise that in Lake Marinapuri at the time. So it's perhaps quite amazing what time heals in some of these locations.
I would agree, but I think creating a reservoir which will end up enhancing the landscape versus some plastic or metal solar farms that will only last 25, 30 years, perhaps. You're talking about a different thing completely, in my view. You've got to consider the long-term impact. And as I say, I think that most of the hydroelectric projects have now they've blended into the environment. And I accept what you say. Yes, at the time they probably were highly controversial, but I think there's been some long-term vision there that I don't see in a solar farm.
Okay. Look, thank you very much, and thank you for taking the time to come online and speak to us. I think it's the first time I've had someone from the UK speak as a submitter in a hearing. I'm sure
it is.
Braid's the same. So yeah, well done. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
No, my
Appreciate
pleasure.
your time.
Thank you. All the best for the rest of the inquiry.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I think we've got Sally McKenzie next.
Thank you.
And just pull it close to you. Yeah, that'd be right.
You tell me if you can't hear me.
We've got you. So, morning and welcome. And you've obviously given us a statement and going to read through that. So
It's with a little ad-libbing, I think, but.
yeah, no, that's fine. Okay.
Good morning. My name is Sally McKenzie. And while my husband and I have retired to Amberley, we lived and farmed in this area for many years. In fact, for my whole life. Our property was Belhammered, 1,000 acres, which was bounded by Georges Road and Purchase Road, reaching from the main highway almost to Mount Brown Road on the south side of the Waipara River. This property, also on dry, light land, was renowned for its shelter belts, quality pasture, particularly lucerne with its deep taproot, and top-class stock. I should add that we also grew olive trees. We had 1,100 olive trees and had a harvester and press for oil. And there are olives up in this district on Mackenzie's Road. My first concern about the proposed solar farm is the fact that sited where it is proposed, it will be a big blot on the beautiful and unique landscape, and so spoil the view completely from the main highway across the Waipara Flat to the hills, and also from the Weka Pass Railway. So not an attractive view for anyone, let alone tourists. Probably my main concern is taking more good farming land out of real production. At present, it is largely running sheep. Sheep we can ill afford to lose, with sheep numbers falling drastically throughout the country. Will this production be able to continue under solar panels? This is predominantly light land in which it is hard enough to establish quality pasture at the best of times, and it must be sown in the autumn with a variety suitable for the area when the rains have come, and will need top dressing and adequate water to sustain it. Will the rain reach the pasture evenly and in good measure, and can the pasture be resown when the grass runs out? Probably in 7 or 8 years, depending on how it's managed and the weather conditions. Can a tractor, cultivating implements and drills pass through the panels? it needs to be noted that spraying and direct drilling are not reliable methods of resowing pasture on this light, stony land in such a hot, dry climate. Our light, dry land, Belhamid, on the side of the river, required irrigation for the continuity of production. To achieve this, we had to acquire a very expensive consent from ECAN and then only allowed a strictly limited and monitored take from it. Eventually, we put down 3 bores, one at 73 metres, one at 97, and one that didn't yield at all. If one does get a consent now, which would be doubtful, as most of this area is red zoned, there is no guarantee of a good yield. And if there was, only a limited take would be allowed. There is no way yet proven to determine the quantity of water below us. To consent to a solar farm, which would surely require a secure water supply without a guaranteed supply at the onset, would not be credible. My next concern is that any glint or glare from the solar panels may be hazardous for drivers and further could even start a fire, much as a broken bottle on the side of the road. The fire risk is a big thing in itself, if for any reason it started among the panels. How could it be safely extinguished? And what of the danger of loose electricity, such as when a power pole gets knocked over? How could firemen, A, get to the site quickly and safely, and B, how feasible that they could bring it under control quickly, given our renowned high winds? Will there be adequate water readily available for firefighting and the means to get it quickly to the site of the fire? Another concern, bearing in mind our history of very strong winds, remember 1975, 1996, and others since, where mature pines blew over like matchsticks, is the strength of all the construction and the strength of the panels themselves. Also, any storage facilities. If material did break or break loose, they would be a hazard to passing traffic and could conceivably end up in the Waipara riverbed. Allied to this is the risk of dust storms during construction or afterwards if the sheep graze the land bare in a drought, which does happen. Thick dust blowing across the main highway would be a real hazard. There is another risk too, that a strong wind can swoop over the top of a shelter belt and cause serious damage where it comes down with force out in the paddock on the other side. Will the continual dust residue from the constant nor'westers coat the panels and reduce their efficiency? The idea of planting trees to screen the panels is good in itself, but it is not a simple matter. The only time to plant trees in this climate is winter or early spring. This, like planting the grass, can't be done to fit a timetable. It must be done when the conditions are right. First, the ground must be ripped with a mole plough, 3 parallel lines to allow the trees to grow strong, deep roots, able to reach down to water lower in the ground and to avoid wind blow. The trees need to be planted with plenty of space to ensure that they can reach ample nutrients and water. Patience is required after this, as in our low rainfall area, growth will be slow. They will need a reliable water supply through irrigation to survive well. As they mature, They will need to be pruned and thinned to allow the wind to blow through, rather than be left to form a hedge and so avoid wind blow, so common in our land of gale force nor'westers. Further to this is the risk of ice forming on the main highway in the morning shade of the hedge or shelter belt, another risk for motorists. I have very strong reservations about trying to establish a solar farm in this area, particularly adjacent to the main highway. Apart from the fact that I feel it will indeed be unsightly there, I feel there are too many hazards and risks involved, too many unknowns, such as the water supply, and also the chances of it continuing as a sheep farm are very slim. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm interested in your comments on tree planting.
Thank you.
When you farmed in that area, did you plant shelter belts on the land?
We were renowned for our shelter belt.
Right. What did you plant and how long did it take to grow?
How long did it take? A lifetime.
To grow? And what were the species that you...
Originally, it was Pinus radiata.
Right.
Latterly, it was a lot, that's gone out of my head. Somebody help me. And of course, we have extensive olive grove as well. Why has the name gone out of my head? Anyway, we were renowned for our shelter belts, and we learned from Andy McCord that you had to let the wind blow through rather than have it dense. Otherwise, it just went like that. So years and years and years of experience. And it's not to be, this area needs trees for shelter. And sadly, now that we have sold the farm, they have all been pulled out, and the whole district reels for us in sorrow that that has happened. It's an absolute travesty.
So just going back to the tree planting, did you have to irrigate those trees to get them?
Absolutely, I have said so right through my talk.
So even the shelter belts you were irrigating?
Absolutely, yes. They wouldn't survive without. I can remember as a small child and my father returning from the war injured, driving a truck which was modified so he could drive it with a 40-gallon drum on the back, and our worker on the back with a bucketing water daily onto all the trees. The only way that they could survive, and nothing's changed.
Can you remember what sort of height your shelter belts were?
They grew quite tall, and then they had to be kept down because some were planted under a subsidy, so they weren't allowed to be topped. Others later were allowed to be trimmed across the top. What would they be? 20 feet?
Okay.
Yeah. But the ones that were planted on subsidy, you weren't allowed to top.
Hmm.
But the ones whose names won't just suddenly come, I'll think of it before.
That's right.
They didn't have to be topped. They were at such a height that they were okay. And we planted green ones and golden ones.
Did you have failures lots through that time? Did some of the planting fail? Died?
Well, yes. Any that wasn't constantly watered did. Same with the garden, the same with the olive groves. They had to have, olive trees had drippers on either side, and they got 2 litres an hour on each side for 5 hours, about 3 times a week to keep them alive. And it was particularly important in the establishment stage. Once if you did the ripping and the trees put their roots down, and if you were lucky, you didn't have to water so much later on, but you certainly did in the first 2 years.
So how many years would you say that you had to water for before they were established?
Well, the olives we kept going right through.
Yeah, but what about the shelter belts? Do you remember how long that you'd had to water for to keep them?
Well, not the pines, but the others we watered for quite a while, and then they needed boron as well. Otherwise, they got dieback. I remember that.
Oh, the only thing you mentioned, you said the area is red zoned.
Yes,
What water? What? Yeah, can you
take? You're not allowed to put down any more new bores.
Right. Okay, but so the applicant is proposing that they are able to transfer someone else's bore.
Well, that's also dubious. I don't think the applicant could say so without, having legal proof of such.
Right.
This area across the river may be slightly different, but I know the water is very limited, and I know there's no more water to be taken out of the river in any shape or form. And this, I take it, must be a variance of that.
Yeah.
So I would look into that extremely carefully.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, another question. With your olives, and you were irrigating those through a dripper system,
Yes.
did that dripper system block up regularly?
No, not regularly. It worked very well, but it still had to be monitored because, things get knocked, etc.
Yeah, but you didn't have problems with the hardness of the water?
No, because there were drippers in the ground rather than a thing on a stick with a spray. So
Right.
that was the most efficient way of watering, because the climate is so tough.
Yes.
With the heat and the wind, any water that's being sprayed, a lot of it gets wasted.
No, that's all. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks for that name.
We got Mr. Trulov next. Give us a minute. Okay, welcome. Again, we've read through your submission, and but happy for you to expand on that, and then we may have some questions.
Thanks very much. Yeah, so I'm Hank Trolloff. I worked for many years for ECA, and I am a suitably qualified person under the National Environment Standards for Industrial Process Heat. So I've been sort of in the, I suppose, climate change, renewable energy space for quite some time. So, I was quite excited to see this project come up. I'm not going to go through my submission. What I'd like to do is actually talk about some of the particular aspects that have changed since I wrote this thing. Namely, a whole lot of international events that have changed the landscape somewhat as far as energy goes, and certainly raised the focus of people on EVs and basically electrical powered devices. So what I really wanted to talk about is just how much this is going to change the resilience of New Zealand's energy system. This solar farm has been proposed in one of the three best solar sites around New Zealand. The first one's up Blenheim Way, this one, and the other one I think is Central Otago. This site has the advantage of having the main supply line pretty much right on the border, and also a very large load, namely Christchurch, handy. So it strikes me as being an ideal site to make the best use of the solar resource that New Zealand has. Right, so with the energy resilience thing, the war in Iran has certainly changed people's focus, and I've heard on the news many people starting to think about buying EVs. The sales are hugely up, but this electricity has got to be generated somewhere. The risk is that the increased generation or the increased electricity required will come from gas, because that's the load, the generation that can respond most quickly. Having more solar will mean that there is more fully renewable energy in the mix, and able to support the greater use of EVs. In one of the projects that I was involved with at the end of last year, it was for a pet food manufacturer who were looking to put in a new site up near Auckland. They were originally thinking of putting in gas-fired boilers. With the issues with the changes in the gas supply, that's pretty much coming to the end of its life, and also the changes of availability of importing natural gas, again, because it's going to have to come from the Middle East. They've suddenly decided, oh, look, we'll go down this less economically viable option of actually putting in electric boilers and electric ovens and things like that. Again, there's more electricity that's going to be used, particularly during the day, so it'll be well matched to solar. On their own site, they'll be putting on solar to actually augment that. Everywhere that I'm looking, transport, electrification, industrial electrification, there is just a need for more renewable energy, renewable electricity. The advantages of this project, New Zealand needs it. That's pretty much as I wanted to talk to, in addition to what I've already said in the submission. I will say that as a result of the conversation here, where I'd said the particular planting options, a couple of them I've suggested apparently not so good for this area, so I stand corrected on some of those. So if there are any questions that you guys have.
Yeah, we may have some. Just going back, you said that you referred to 3 sites in New Zealand, and I'm assuming you're talking generically in terms of solar being Marlborough, this area, and Central Otago. Is that Sunshine Hours? Is that what that's related to?
That's Sunshine Hours, yes.
So none in the North Island? Or are you just talking?
I believe there's some reasonable sites again around Hawke's Bay, and I think up in Northland there's some good ones. But yeah, if you look at the energy maps that NIWA put out, then it's very clear which ones are have the best solar resource. These are more cloud-free skies, and just good long clear solar hours. So yeah.
Just going back to your evidence, you referred to photovoltaic panels do not have a high embodied energy. What's that mean?
Okay, so embodied energy is the amount of energy that's required to make the product. So you can apply embodied energy to anything really. So if you were to say put in a hydro station, you've got the embodied energy of all the construction equipment that goes with that, the concrete. So there's a lot of energy in putting in concrete. So to get the concrete on site, to make the concrete, to make the cement, all those have an embodied energy which is quite high. Something like a solar panel, which actually there's not a lot of mass in them. The materials are fairly common. The amount of the rare earth elements in the panels, I haven't really been following much the technology of what's in them, but you guys would know better. There is an energy cost in mining those materials, but again, the actual quantities used are very small. So all up, the energy required to manufacture, install, and maintain a panel and a solar farm is very low.
Compared with other renewable
renewable energy options, but compared with a fair number of most other things really.
We, in relation to wind farms, where does solar sit?
Ooh, it's a good question. They, in my estimation, they'd be very similar. I haven't seen the figures for putting up a wind turbine. Again, the materials in a wind turbine are not that, they're not uncommon, they're not high embodied energy. So
essentially, if I was to sort of simplify it, high embodied energy sort of relates to the construction costs and the energy required for that construction cost.
it is part of it, yeah. Yep.
Does it deal with the lifespan? So hydro, I mean, we've got hydro lakes in this country that have been in place since the 1930s and are still being used, compared with, say, a solar farm and indeed a wind farm, which seem to have lifespans in terms of the panels at least of 35 to 40 years. So is that equation built into that?
Most people won't quote it as with lifespan in mind, but certainly there's no reason it can't be calculated out. Knowing that there will be succession and replacement during the life of a project for sure.
Are you familiar with the Waipara conditions?
No.
Okay. Sorry, I might need to, so not the conditions of the application, the climate conditions.
We live not too far away, and so we live near the foot of Mount Grey.
Okay, so I probably can ask this question. What's your experience in terms of growth rates? Or
so on which year and which species? So we are trying to regenerate native forestry on our own property. We currently have a whole plantation there with pines and macrocarbas, eucalypts and things like that. So we're sort of trying out a technique to do some succession by maintaining the already established pines and things as sort of a canopy, you could say. But what we've found is that around our place we've observed there's particular species that do well and seem to last through the droughts and seem to manage to be swamped as well when we actually do get some rain. So it's been a learning experience for us. And this past year being quite wet, things have just exploded. So the growth rate has been very high. During the dry year, the previous year, things just stalled. They did grow, and but so it was very much dry year. There won't be much growth. Wet year, real high. So it depends on the species a bit, but the ones that we've worked out for around our area, that's what we're observing is they will survive through those conditions.
Are you having to irrigate?
For the first couple of months, if we've just planted something in and it's had a bit of root disturbance, sure, we'll give it a bit of hand watering and things like that. But beyond that, no, they're fending for themselves.
I do have some questions for you. Yesterday, somebody mentioned that you wouldn't build a cafe. You'd build a cafe that overlooked vineyards, but you wouldn't build a cafe that overlooked the solar farm because nobody would go. From your evidence, would you be somebody that would go to a cafe overlooking the solar farm?
I'd probably am the type of person who would go to a cafe with a solar farm.
Do you think you'd have many friends in that cafe?
Well, they'd probably all be fairly similar to me.
So no, more seriously, other submitters have been concerned about whether having a solar farm might lead to needing more infrastructure, and in particular batteries, and the idea that most of the demand is in the evenings when solar is not producing. What's your take on that?
Well, the battery question is an interesting one, and I'm kind of keeping an eye on what technologies are changing, what chemistries are coming out, because they are changing quite quickly. And the Chinese have just released commercially some non-lithium batteries. I believe they're sodium sulfur, so very, very common elements. So certainly a huge space, a great space to keep an eye on. I don't recall you guys having any batteries in the system. I don't think they're necessary. We have an electricity infrastructure to deal with that, namely some lakes that can act as quite good storage and sort of meet those demands during the night, and sort of provide some level of control when the sun's not out or not doing quite what it ought to. So yeah, I don't see the need for batteries here, and yeah, on our own place where we do have solar, yeah, we don't have batteries either, and we just change our loads to work during the day. So the car that I bought here, it's powered by sunlight that charges during the day, and the fuel crisis does not affect us much. So yeah.
So what you're touching on there is really about the distribution network, and I have a little bit of knowledge, which is probably dangerous. There's a transmission sort of national network, and then there's local networks. Now my crude understanding of it is that the lakes, and particularly Benmore, feed into a DC line that fires straight to the North Island. And so therefore, managing demand with lakes, if you have a solar farm, say at the top of the South Island, requires quite a considerable change to how distribution is managed. Do you see where I'm getting?
Yeah.
So how does that work?
So the use of the lakes for actually controlling that, responding to that demand, is very controlled by the rules around how they run those stations. At the moment, they're used as a base load, and the gas-fired power plants are used for responding to those peaks and troughs, and any variation that comes from the renewable supplies such as the wind and solar. There would need to be a bit of a change of rules, more than anything else. It's not a change of infrastructure, it's a change of rules for how those lakes are run. Are they allowed to actually change the volumes just that little bit more to help respond to that? So I think it's not an infrastructure thing. I think it's actually just the rules for how the infrastructure is actually run that would need to change a little bit.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Dr. Moody. Oh. And Cypress was here.
No, right.
August,
Yeah, excellent. So,
What's not happening? It's not
on the board.
just need to make a speaker. Sorry. Oh, you can move.
Yeah,
It.
I mean, apologies.
We need some solar panels in here.
You can move it over a little.
Oh, okay. All right, about all this messing around here. Oh, I don't think it makes much difference actually. But probably better over here.
Morning.
Marina.
Money.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to comment on this application. My credentials there, I think, speak for themselves. I don't need to go through that anymore. I would importantly note that my evidence relates to the wider contextual and collateral effects performed, while I acknowledge the applicant has pursued an otherwise laudable cause of moving to sustainable energy through harvesting sunshine. Other submitters have made more than adequately covered the likely immediate and downstream impacts of the proposal and visual disturbances. I've read and will respond to some of the rebuttal evidence. So my particular area of concern is largely contained within the orange ellipse in the picture here, encompassing part of an old upper terrace of the Wicker Creek catchment, and formerly partly characterised by indigenous shrubland, which you can see dotted across the picture there inside that ellipse. I'd first challenge the description of the plant community by the applicant as a predominantly dominated by shrub weeds. The picture in the bottom left corner there shows, and satellite reinforces, the predominantly Matagari to Matakuru native shrubland that prevailed there. Secondly, there are calculations that we've done of the former extent of that indigenous shrubland, and it's at least double the permissible clearances under the district plan. Well, with my extensive knowledge and experience across the country, across Canterbury, across this part of the Canterbury region, and of the state of our natural ecology, this loss, this clearance can only be classed as a tragedy. The cleared area was one of the largest indigenous shrubland remnants on a Canterbury Plains terrace flat of this kind. The uncultivated land with 200-year-old Tumatakuru would also have supported a whole range of subsoil fungi and bacteria, soil fauna, the original soil structure, and some other native plants. Such ancient remnants, even when degraded, are of distinctly higher status than planting some shrubs to replace them in cultivated or modified land. The landscape of natural character that is visible is key to preserving our natural heritage, because otherwise extinction of experience, which we're suffering across the country really, but particularly in Canterbury, leads to extinction of species, which is leading to the outcomes I would suggest are being witnessed here. The plains are down to 1% of their original natural cover, so even a single remaining shrub is of paramount significance. We cannot afford to lose any more. It is the ultimate in loss of human connectivity to their place and its heritage. Understanding the differences causes between rainforest, alpine meadows, scarp woodlands, terrace grasslands, wetlands, etc. And that each type is separately and supremely significant in its own right, especially when it's down to the last fragment. Even if it is degraded, it's still highly significant because that's all we've got. An involvement in greening Waipara and all of this and the background and that context will be elaborated by another presenter. But I was directly involved in designing and implementing the Greening Waipara program, the biodiversity component of it 20 years ago. And it was specifically conceived to highlight, protect, and expand the natural values of the district for the purposes of both productive ecosystem functionality through enhanced biocontrol of pests, preserving landscape natural character, providing clean green brand for the developing wine industry, and a basis for genuine ecotourism. So this destruction of extensive habitat negates the purposes that inspired the Greening Waipara project and all of the money that was directly invested and all the personal effort that went into it. So one cannot divorce this loss from its effect on the wider community. And it is presumably unintentionally insulting and causes despair to the thousands of community volunteers across Canterbury who've been doing planting and maintenance for decades in the belief they will positively rebuilding the past losses of nature. And yet overnight, you could argue that all their hours and days and years working for that purpose and hope is essentially suddenly rendered worthless or negated. So I should also note that removal of the solar farm, the applicant has done from the area to be occupied by solar panels of that area that was formerly occupied by native shrubland, does not remove culpability for destroying our natural heritage. If the applicant truly believed this was of no value, then why would they choose this ploy to apparently remove it from consideration? So there seems to be some sort of contradiction here. What kind of compensation is possible? There are plans to plant a lot of trees, shrubs, and shelter belts, but this needs to be thought through with more local knowledge and experience. Regarding offsetting as a popular remedy for loss of nature, such measures are intended to replace lost species, but replacing a 200-year-old shrub with 2 to 3 year old seedlings is clearly not equivalent. Also, for representativeness, scarps, terrace scarps are not equivalent to terrace flats, which have distinct soils, drainage, and natural life. Compensation would have to be seen minimally as planting equivalent age for age on equivalent landforms and soils. So the real remedy, of course, nothing can immediately bring back centuries-old ecosystems. The real cost of even planting and managing to maturity a shrubland of the original species, would conceivably cost in the order of millions of dollars. So all remaining shrubs, I would argue, and remnants across the district should forthwith be acquired and protected, and paddocks, scarps, roadsides, and expanded, pest managed, and enriched to rebuild the original diversity that existed there. Importantly, in this case, equivalent areas of terrace land should be acquired and planted with age equivalent amounts of species. So minimally that involves 100 times the number of destroyed shrubs with 2-year-old seedlings planted and maintained for a decade. So that's based on a minimal estimated age of the lost shrubs of about 200 years. And I can argue why that estimate is true. So, what does it all mean anyway? I realise this is a rather sort of philosophical and esoteric kind of question. What is Matagauri? Well, it's actually Tumatakuru. But I just learned the other day that it actually means the face of a crayfish, of a kura. I guess one could see that connection. It's an endemic character shrub or small tree. They can grow as old man Matagauri, if you've heard of, you know, that can grow up to 5, 6, 7 meters and be there for centuries. And it's reminiscent of the East and South Island, some bits of the North Island, but primarily the South Island, which is tolerant of dry and cold conditions. Why does it matter? Well, you know, one's got to ask, is our only purpose and reason for living to turn our entire planet into a factory for our endless consumption and gratification until it collapses under us? Well, I would say that life should be somewhat more than that. We should be able to appreciate the natural beauty of our endemic Tumatakuru. You can see it in different sort of contexts. I know it could be a bit prickly, but you know, that's part of its special character. It's the only native spiny shrub, actually, that New Zealand has. Well, I'm sure all of this goes under most people's radar precisely because of that extinction of experience syndrome I referred to. But as an experienced observer of nature, I've seen death by 1,000 cuts unfolding endlessly across the plains. And people keep reporting this destruction to me, thinking I can do something about it. But this just adds to the grief, the burden, the distress, and the sorrow. It's hard to avoid the fact that I lost my dear daughter Carla 6 months ago, which makes you question the purpose of life and emphatically reminds us you can't take your wealth with you. But she embodied the belief we can live fulfilling, connected, and form joyful lives together if we can desire to value and love our planet. So for God's sake, stop this endless destruction of our unique, authentic heritage that gives us our identity as a legitimate part of civilization and guardian of our special part of the planet for all, for our children and their spirit. Well, we keep saying that this must never happen again. There needs to be a wider education about values and responsibilities in councils, communities, maintenance staff, across the board for ecological and historical literacy to underpin decision-making. John Andrews' rebuttal evidence seems to miss a point about the ecological value of what has been lost by implying that all the sensitive values are on the lower terraces and along the river. This fails to understand the highly threatened natural values of prime land on high terraces that have been decimated. Nature doesn't just belong on rubbish land that has no immediate commercial value. It's like we have some kind of inferiority complex about our nature, pushing it out of sight and out of mind. The applicant's evidence also fails to grasp the transformative visual effect of more exotic conifer shelter planting in the most visible parts of the landscape. Typically, there's little appreciation of the real nature of our land, that even minute remnants are just getting in the way of the real productive landscape and should be eliminated, continuing to undermine our land's visual heritage. So we shouldn't dismiss this kind of aspect as irrelevant to the current scope and application. Everything is connected. Our clean green image is rapidly becoming a myth. What are we authentically selling to tourists? Lupin meadows? What is unique to Aotearoa New Zealand? Sheep farms, our solar farms, Yes, they are all legitimate layers of our history, but all the deeper layers need to be respected and revealed as the last fragments, as sources or models of our natural world. Restored nature, and of course, these cultural layers are all part of it. I accept that, as long as it's done sensitively. So, in summary, regardless of the outcome of the solar farm application, which should have been considered separately, in my view, it's rather difficult to join these two things together. We need to protect all the nature that is left in the district, ensuring no further loss of our precious natural heritage, including the necessary weed and pest eradication, like the boxthorn. We note that vegetation area cleared is native vegetation and far exceeds even the relatively lax district plan's limit on permitted clearance. Its value is indirectly acknowledged by the applicant through removing it from the proposed solar panel installation area. We need to carry out full compensatory restoration for this loss on equivalent land on a plant age for age basis, with restoration and enhancement of terrace scarps also being desirable, of course. We need to fix that as well. A lot of weeds there. Any shelter planting should incorporate appropriate indigenous trees and ultimately displace faster growing exotic conifers. We need to prioritise, acknowledge, understand, respect our genuine history in all its layers and the importance of that to local identity, building a more genuine sense of historical and ecological literacy in the community, and support the purpose, the mission of greening Waipara, and further reflect on our purpose in this world and the biodiversity trails that were part of that. And, you know, I would argue the time is now. Waking in the middle of the night trying to make sense of the world, having suffered the worst personal possible loss, how does one express the loss of a natural treasure of taonga? I want to quickly say this is not judging or second-guessing the motives of the applicant. It is a societal issue of awareness that we must address. We must hold and rebuild functionality in the landscape so we and visitors know we are in Waipara, Waitaha, Aotearoa. Kia ora.
Thank you very much. And firstly, can we send our condolences to you and the rest of your family? As you're probably aware, I was aware of this, and I did inform Commissioner Bray about your loss, so our condolences. So we've got some questions, but we've probably got some broader questions for you.
Yeah.
So I'm going to let Commissioner Bray start on this because it's more in his area than mine.
Okay. So yes, thank you firstly for setting out your credentials, which I have been aware of through my career anyway. Can I just confirm, so your submission is neutral?
Yes, it is in regards to
the solar
panel issues. I don't have expertise in that field.
Yeah.
And my main focus has been on associated loss of nature.
Yeah, no, that's helpful to know.
And what compensation would be
necessary,
relevant.
Now, this is going to sound like I have no idea what I'm talking about, but I need to ask it anyway. If you were to look at the stand of Matagari that was there, or Tumatakaru, and you didn't know necessarily what you were looking at, if you know, perhaps you were a farmer or you were just a lay person, not with your experience or perhaps, mine looking at landscape. How would you know that it was significant? How would you, because it looks like a patchy, scrubby thing that's, it's almost like a native gorse that's just taken over, in a very simple term. So how would you know that it's significant?
Well, it's a good question, and it does relate to that broader point that I made about community knowledge and ecological literacy, which I think is missing from a lot of our education. And it also relates to that problem of extinction of experience, where we've grown up in an otherwise completely modified and exotic dominated landscape. And so the ability to recognise the specialness of such things is hugely depleted across the community. My only other response in regards to that, and I kind of sense of where that question might lead to, how can you blame anyone for doing such thing? And I said at the end there, I'm not second guessing the motives here, is that there had been an application to carry out the clearance, but it was not waited for it was the applicant didn't wait for the response from council, who could have provided that lens over its significance. And given that it exceeded the area, that is allowed to be cleared, one presumed it wouldn't have been permitted. So there should have, even if individuals don't necessarily know the significance of something or the importance of something, there is supposedly a step in the process that should allow that to be discovered or to be pointed out and to be remedied accordingly.
And so, in your experience, what sort of level of expertise do you think would be needed? If as a society we don't necessarily know what these plants are, what sort of experience or expertise do you think would be needed to understand?
Well, I would think actually most people in East and South Island, live on the land or around the land or go tramping on the land, actually know or have heard of Matagauri.
Yes.
Often due to unpleasant experiences as much as anything. Of course, they don't know some of these other interesting facts about it, like as I pointed out, it actually is pollinated by a native fly, which in turn parasitizes grass grubs. And one of the causes of the explosion of grass grub, across farmland and South Island in particular, was because of the loss of that grey shrubland, of which Matagauri was a key component, that provided the natural biological control of grass. So it's an ironic outcome, unintended consequence. So, yes, I mean, not even many trained ecologists have got that knowledge, specific knowledge, but there are some standard measures of significance relating to rarity within a district too. It's not rarity of something, whether there's a lot of it up in some other part of the country, and representativeness of each of the different kinds of habitats. And that's why the terrace flatland is crucial here, because yes, there's quite a bit of Matagauri on some of the scarps, the steep scarps on the hill country gullies and so on. where it hasn't been able to be cultivated. But that's why it makes this particular location especially important. And, you know, I think all councils have some ecological expertise within them, or they consult, and Huranui certainly does. Had they been brought into the picture, no doubt would have been able to express that view.
Okay, no, that's helpful. Thank you. Perhaps what I'd like to do now is just turn into how do we go about replacing and how do we go about growing, which you sort of touched on, but I really want to dig in a bit more of your experience and understanding, particularly as part of your greening Waipara. How do we grow plants in this location, and how long do they take, and what's needed to make them succeed?
Well, as we know, and we've heard from other submitters, growth is naturally very slow, and it's very susceptible to drought, and we can't necessarily predict, you know, what the immediate future climate is going to be like. And so any restoration work in this kind of environment, first of all, requires seed collection and propagation, and then planting appropriate species in appropriate locations, which requires some ecological knowledge. Planting well, and then suppressing competitive grass, and having available, you're planting also at the right time of year to maximize the soil moisture conditions and minimize frost conditions if it's in a frost sensitive area. But also in this particular situation, to have temporary irrigation available during establishment, because many of these things in nature originally probably only established once in a human lifetime, when conditions were ideal. But if we try to sort of accelerate that process, then you have to overcome the risk of, you know, a bad year coming up, you know, a severely drought-prone year. So, but that should be a temporary measure. The species chosen should be species that ultimately are suited to the specific environment and can survive long term, even if the growth rate slows down considerably.
Well, that's helpful direction, because have you seen the proposed species list?
Yes, I've skipped through it, I have to say, and you know, I think I could sort of modify it a little bit, and it would depend, because it was specifically related to planting on scarp terraces. Correct. The scarps rather than on the flats. So one would be looking at a slightly different, you know, palette of species.
And does planting on the scarp terrace, the slope, is that more challenging than planting on the flatter terrace?
In general, yes, especially if they're north-facing slopes. Often the substrate is more stony and coarser, and obviously it has a stronger sun exposure and heating, and you know, water, of course, drains off it very, very rapidly. Whereas on the terrace top, there's likely to be more accumulated, finer deposition of silt and and more water holding capacity.
Okay, and so let's assume that good preparation is done. A species list that is refined is put in, and irrigation is provided to some extent. What sort of growth rates would you anticipate in this area? How quickly would you see things becoming established?
Well, different plants grow at different rates, and as we've discussed, depending on what the seasons are like, and at the beginning, whether irrigation is provided, you could maximally expect native plants, to put on 10, 20 centimetres of growth a year. But once they're sort of established and are responding to the natural climatic conditions, that might vary from year to year, down to, maybe sort of 10 centimetres a year, but up to maybe, 30 centimetres or more a year, depending on the species. So, yeah, it's slow. New Zealand native plants are slow growing by definition. But there's a few things, that, and again, depending on just precisely where it was, like New Zealand ribbonwoods, can grow quite quickly, and pittosporums and so on. But some bigger, longer term trees like kowhai can be very slow. Kānuka is relatively fast, but it has to be carefully established. It's often doesn't like being transplanted very much, So, yeah, there's quite a bit of knowledge though about the best ways to do this restoration on these kind of environments. And the Greening Waipara project has got a lot of that experience directly.
I'll just ask you, just because you were involved in it and you know that I was commissioner on it, the Waipara wastewater with the Kānuka that was planted, that has that in it, and I know, under my understanding, those soils, not exactly the greatest soils floating around. Is that gone all right? Do you know?
Yes, in general. I mean, it's only just been, the initial planting has only just been established there, hasn't it? But in general, if you're talking about Kānuka growth, it's on those loess soils, it's generally sort of working quite well. I mean, there's varying ways of managing that. For example, doing it in sheep grazed paddocks, because Kānuka is not palatable to sheep, and it actually benefits from having all the grass cut down, by that grazing in between. But I haven't got the latest knowledge of exactly how the Akaroa planting site is going, but I know of growth rates in similar types of environments there, and as I say, providing the plants are in good condition when they go in, they're planted well, and they are, any sort of grass competition is suppressed, either through weed mats or grazing or mowing or whatever. Yes, they perform relatively well, and often there's a slow initial stage while the sort of shoots and roots come into balance, and the roots have grown sufficiently to support the shoot growth. But often, nursery grown plants, they're a bit pot bound, and they take a while to kind of build up that balance. And so the tops kind of like look a bit static for a while until those roots have got going.
Let me just think about it. I think you've answered my questions on native species. By chance, do you have much knowledge on planting the exotic? So Cupressus and Thuya are the two species here, and I know your preference is on native species, but do you have any knowledge on planting those evergreen shelter belts?
Well, only observation. I mean, I'm aware that exotic conifers in general perform very well in New Zealand because they come from a continental, harsher environment and come to New Zealand, which is relatively mild and so on, and say whoopee, and they grow like crazy. And of course, certainly, especially if they're being irrigated, as it's posed in this case, yes, they'll undoubtedly grow very well. But my proposition in regards to that, in general, any sort of shelter planting, which of course dominates our farmed landscapes now, is that we should be looking at a succession plan to gradually displace those with something that is more local and relevant to our location. And, increasingly through the rural environments, there are more native plant shelter belts, and I think you can see plenty of examples of where they're thriving, actually, and doing very nicely, depending again on the soils and whether the sort of marginal irrigation coming in, all of those things affect the outcome.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. So how would you go about that? I think the application has an area of 4 meters wide to allow for the screen planting, which is proposed to be the evergreen. So how would you go about, that transition in that space, or do you think grade is needed, or how would that work?
Well, you would incorporate, a mix of native species within those, and possibly that might be done successionally, like there might be some species that would go in initially and then others that would come in subsequently. And then over time, one would thin the exotics from that to sort of accelerate the replacement.
Okay, that's been helpful for me.
Yep, and you've answered all my questions as well. So thank you very much for that. It's been
very helpful.
Very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
How about it's 10, so we'll take a break. And I think we've only got one more for this morning. So Ms. Antle. So we'll take a break for 15 minutes and back at 11:45. Okay. Lee, sorry, I missed you before morning tea, but thankfully you'd spotted my mistake. So we have read through your submission, but we're happy for you to talk to that and to then we've probably got a fair few questions for you afterwards. So over to you.
Thank you. Well, as I say in my submission, my name's William Woodhouse Lee, and I reside with my wife at 249 Mackenzie's Road. And the property we're on was bought as a bare land block in 2015, totaling about 19 hectares, and we then subdivided it. We've got 13 hectares, and our daughter, who presented yesterday, has got 6 hectares. And part of our property, which is situated on the east side of the Weka stream, directly overlooks the proposed solar farm. And I use that word overlook deliberately. It's not a level perspective, it overlooks it. And we have a commercial kitchen on this part, which has these direct views. And our property bounds the property of our daughter. With regards to my qualifications and experience, I have a BAg Sci degree from Lincoln University, majoring in soil science, agronomy, and farm business management. And I also have a Master's of Agricultural Science, majoring in resource economics and farm business management. I'm a Chartered Fellow of the New Zealand Institute of Directors and currently hold directorships in several companies, including one which designs and installs hybrid solar systems, including battery storage, up to about 1 megawatt in size, mainly in rural areas of Canterbury, Marlborough, and the West Coast. And that company has a full order book for about the next 18 months. So there's a very strong demand for these smaller scale solar installs in rural areas. I'm also director of a company which has developed and manufactures a New Zealand certified state-of-art real-time dual revenue power quality meter, which is currently sold in New Zealand and subject to relevant certification, about to be sold in both Australia and the USA. I was also a director of a community trust-owned power company, Lines, for 9 years, Fuller Electrical. And during that time, we had a 50% share in a retail company called Pulse, which had about 70,000 customers. So I'm well equipped to know a bit about the retail industry as well. And on our property, we have a 75 panel, 30 kilowatt, ground mounted, completely off-grid solar system, which has 72 kilowatt hours of battery storage. And it provides power to our dwelling and our daughter's dwelling and extensive irrigation system. Given all this, I feel I'm familiar with and believe I have a good working knowledge of the power industry and its current features and trends in each of New Zealand, Australia, and the US markets. So I feel I'm coming to this submission with a good working knowledge of the New Zealand power industry. With regard to our property, we have currently got 1,300 trees planted, which produce black truffles on a fully commercial basis. These trees, which were planted as infected seedlings at about 15 to 20 centimetres in height, vary in age from planting between 6 to 9 years. And a family-owned company manages and markets products from this truffery, along with the truffery of our daughter and son-in-law, which have a further 400 trees of the same age. In total, the company manages 1,700 truffle trees over an area of about 9 hectares. We also harvest and market truffles from another truffery of 1,000 trees in the area, which we formerly owned. We've also planted approximately another 200 trees, mainly natives, on the property. Most of these trees were planted in the first 2 years of ownership as part of a deliberate strategy to provide screening between a planned new house and the planned solar panels.
And when we completed our dwelling in 2019, the screening trees were between 1 to 1.5 meters in height and between 3 to 4 years old. And these trees are on heavier soils than those of the applicant's site and have been regularly watered from time of planting. The truffle trees are regularly watered through the summer by a comprehensive sprinkler system, and the rest are trickle or sprinkle irrigated, also on a regular basis. The truffle trees themselves are virtually all evergreen oaks, Quercus ilex, and they presently average about 2.5 meters in height. And I understand you're going to come to the site this afternoon and you'll be able to see them as you drive past. And the soils on the property are moderately stony silt loam, which have been modified to grow truffles by increasing the pH from about 6.5 to 7.8 plus by way of applications of lime. And these soils are slightly heavier than those on the applicant's site and less stony. And for all of the trees, we use about 4,000 cubic meters. That's 4 million litres a year for the water. Now, if I talk about the themes around my submission, I should start off by saying, in the face of climate change and the worldwide need to reduce carbon emissions from using fossil fuels, solar power will play a key role in the move toward providing energy by way of electrification. So that's a given. And as can be seen from my introduction, I'm already proactively and intimately involved in this shift. And I'm very positive in general about the role solar power will play in the future. However, my observation is that New Zealand is somewhat behind other parts of the world regarding having an extensive and lengthy history of solar power. Nor are many participants in New Zealand industry aware of some of the trends and their effects which are occurring elsewhere. Presently, the industry is somewhat of a vacuum with respect to clear policy settings around new generation, including solar, which creates a degree of uncertainty around what the future will look like. So the investment risk, as a consequence of this, there's a risk of some decisions around resource and investment planning becoming redundant and having negative long-term effects. And an obvious example I'll give you this is in South Australia, which for several reasons, including state and federal incentives and overseas investor interests, had a rush into large-scale solar installations. This surge in power generation had two major effects, namely overload stress on existing transmission systems and an excess of daytime power generation and supply, to the extent that the excess power had no market value and could not be sold. So in short, there was in the rush, there was an immediate oversupply of no value. From an investment perspective, the safest model I've seen is one where the supply can be stored if needed by way of battery or battery equivalent, such as hydro. The existing transmission structure can handle the load, and the power is already in effect pre-purchased. Most of the large-scale solar developments in the US work this way, i.e. they have a vertical structure, which is a lot safer from an investment point of view. Several large-scale solar projects in New Zealand involving some of the gene tailors have been set up in a similar way and can successfully manipulate storage and usage around different power sources to meet customer use patterns. Rather than just large-scale projects, much of the solar generation in other areas of the world is now tending to revolve around developments at the household level. In Europe especially, balcony inverters, this is an example, are becoming more common. These are plug-in panels incorporating an inverter, which produces instant power to the household or commercial user. Current New Zealand regulations prevent their use here, but it's only a matter of time before regulations change and they become common in New Zealand and enlarging the mix of solar options. The transmission grid in New Zealand, as in the rest of the world, historically has been designed around a small number of power sources, transmitting more or less steady state power one way towards users. And the carrying capacity of the grid is specified and built around this model. The development of solar has turned this model on its head, in that power now comes from a myriad of sources. The grid must handle power group going either way, and transmission lines now become overloaded, especially when large-scale solar at peak power generation times. For the time being at least, a widespread of similar scale solar is a safer bet in New Zealand in the face of looming capital upgrades of the transmission grid and of increasing problems around both erratic power quality and power supply. My understanding of the applicant's project is the scheme will be directly connected to the Transpower grid. That power will be provided as and when it is generated, which is during daytime hours when power demand and spot prices are at the lowest, and there is no fixed supply agreement in place with any retailer, which in my view makes it a risky long-term investment. And the fact that the policy framework is still being worked through only increases the risk. And if you look at the whole policy issue from a very big point of view, you can either develop it, what I would call a top-down model, in which the government sets a framework in that power is generated in large-scale areas for the immediate benefit of New Zealand, and a lesser consequence is the effects on regional areas. So you've got a direct benefit to the country and perhaps a cost to the regions. And the other way around is a bottom-up policy framework which enhances regional development, which benefits the region first, and then subsequently benefits the nation as a whole. And that policy framework hasn't yet been set, but my very strong view is, especially from a Huranui ratepayer, is the bottom-up process is much better. And my argument is, as I'll further explain, that there's very little net benefit to the region, and there are benefits to the nation. But to me, it's at a cost to the Huranui district. So if I look at the net benefits of the scheme, when outlining future costs and benefits, my submission reiterates a theme which will have been constant in this hearing, which is with regards to economic and social costs, there are major landscape effects of the completed project, which will have a significant negative effect on the Waipara district and the personal well-being and businesses of many people within it. And during the build process, there will be noise and dust problems for those living close at hand, especially on the downwind side. And the deficiencies with regards to planned mitigation steps, especially regarding the landscape effects, but also other significant effects, will also no doubt have been a constant theme throughout the hearing. So I'm not going to dwell on them in detail. But suffice it to say that from a personal experience of growing trees in the area, the applicant's projections as to growth are somewhat optimistic, notwithstanding their outside expert opinion, and the difficulties of growing trees here are underestimated. Further to that, the proposed tree screening height will be grossly inadequate, and what screening is provided won't eventuate until long after the scheme has been built. Regarding benefits, long-term, as I see it, there will be very little net benefit to the Waipara and the greater Huranui community. My understanding is that the ultimate company behind the project, Aquila, which is based in Germany, owns a subsidiary, Aquila Clean Energy, which in turn has then partnered with Far Northern Solar to undertake the project, which means a significant share of dividends and or profits will not remain in New Zealand. The power generated will not be used by anyone within the greater Huranui area. There will be minimal local employment, apart from some local contractors having some employment during the build. And the claim is made that it's good for New Zealand, And it is, to the extent that it provides solar power along with other solar providers. It won't provide cheaper power to consumers from other providers, however. So from a regional perspective, I believe that a standard economic cost benefit analysis would likely to conclude that the total costs outweigh total benefits regarding this project as it currently stands. And as I say, given the policy vacuum, that could ultimately be very costly to us. From a purely personal point of view, we view the cost of no longer living and working in the landscape as we presently have as being significant. So if the landscape's changed significantly, it's going to be, to us personally, a cost. And we were attracted to the area because of the scenic features, the wine growing and associated activities, and the fact that it has soils and climate highly suitable for growing black truffles, and it is close to an international airport for their export. As part of our business operations, we've developed an agri-tourism strategy whereby we run truffle huts for local and increasingly international tourists. We promote this on the website and show scenes of the local landscape, as well as that of our site, and of various aspects of the hunt itself, including shots of the dogs working to locate truffles. We run several per harvesting season, and they are invariably all sold out. And when questioned as to why they come, customers invariably reply to see the landscape firsthand, to enjoy watching the dogs work, and to then partake of a truffle-themed meal at one of the local restaurants, which we supply. Our great fear is that an industrial development such as that proposed will negate the landscape effect to the extent that we suffer a loss in income from less people being attracted to partake in a truffle hunt. And by way of background, we have participated in truffle hunts in both Spain and France for exactly the same reasons as people do on our property, and nowhere have we seen a large-scale solar farm in close proximity. We note in passing, however, that the Bordeaux area of France, which is renowned for its mix of vineyards and trufferies, has several small-scale, 50 to 100 panel solar schemes settled throughout the area, which have been blended into the landscape by sympathetic planting and the fact that they don't dominate the view. So the conditions that I request is that the project be reduced to about 10 to 15 megawatt in size, which would reduce the overall landscape effect on the district and would allow scope to be directly linked to a community project, for example, via delivery to the local main power owned grid, which is the bottom-up approach, which means the region benefits and it's not a top-down approach. There's many examples of this already occurring in New Zealand. There's a company called Lodestone, which is a solar install company, which has adopted a strategy of working with communities, sizing the schemes to fit the community needs, and ensuring that there's a net benefit straight away by using the local grids and also supplying local users. And some of them have agreed supply arrangements and price arrangements. And the Waipara area district next door to us is doing this. They've set up several small solar farms of around 10 megawatts. They've worked in with the local lines company main power, which means that the locals benefit directly. And I just think there's a fundamental issue with this whole scheme in that it overlooks the local people. Sure, it may have a benefit to New Zealand, but to me, it's just trampling on our regional perspective. So that's my first addition, that there is a project be allowed, but it be very much reduced, and it be set up in the northern corner of the proposed scheme, which is as far away from local residents as possible. It's next door to a person who's okayed it, and it's away from the highway. So that's my second point, and that also I'd like to see that the construction doesn't commence until such time as the tree screening is assessed as adequate by an independent assessor chosen by the Huronui District Council. And finally, I'd like to see that the adequate safeguards in place to ensure that the construction will be dismantled and taken down if the project becomes redundant or faces financial failure. And I can give an example of this provision. We used to farm on a property in Gebbies Valley, and there was wind flow technology applied to have a wind farm in Gebbies Valley. And the local residents of McQueen's Valley and Gebbies Valley objected on the basis that they thought it would be detrimental to the landscape values of the area. And the outcome was that we didn't want to stand in the way of progress. There was a prototype windmill set up, and because wind also is going to be part of our future, and there was an undertaking from the company that if things failed, they would take it down, and that was in the resource consent. The companies, notwithstanding their enthusiastic projections that they were going to make a lot of money, failed. And the tower is still there because the provision that they were going to take it down on resource consent had no teeth to it. So I would like to think that if this provision is there, it does have teeth. And that's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just we've got a few questions for you. So, perhaps if I can just start with one. I just want to go back to you talked about the vacuum and policy settings.
Yeah.
That vacuum is outside of the resource management process, I'm assuming, is what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So that's the vacuum in terms of the electricity market and how that is then how that's regulated.
The EA is still struggling. Transpower tried to do projections around future demand and supply, where they're going to. It's a whole mayhem at the moment in terms of moving parts. The government hasn't yet formed a view on where things sit. So there's just so many balls up in the air at the moment. I'm
sure you're aware of the national policy statement on renewable energy.
In vague terms, yes.
Which is
and it's deliberately vague, but anyway.
Yeah, which has recently been amended and strengthens the renewable energy provisions in there.
Oh yeah, I've got no hang about renewable. That's not the point I'm making.
I understand the point you're making, but a lot of that sits outside of what
I appreciate that, but nonetheless, if you as decision makers have got to have some perspective, so I'm trying to give you a perspective.
Yep, understand that. You talked about the load transmission lines from solar. Does the same issue apply with wind?
Yes.
So you've got that daytime issue with solar. Wind is obviously different because it's going during the night, but if the wind's not blowing, the same issue applies.
Yeah.
Or it is blowing, the same issue applies.
Well, it's intermittent, the same as solar, and also originally you had hydro schemes in New Zealand, 80% hydro schemes. It's a big single source and all went one direction. Very easy model to manage and use. And now you've got points of generation all through the grid, and you're not sure what the size they are and when they're going to come. So it's very, very difficult to match supply and demand, and it's very difficult to predict the loads that are going to be on transmission lines. So it's quite a complex industry now compared with what it used to be.
So 15 odd years ago, when maybe slightly longer, when the wind farm thing was, they were consenting wind farms all over the place. A lot of them were never built. But at the time, the reasoning behind a lot of that was to spread the diversity of wind, and I'm just talking about wind at the moment, but solar has the same issue, to spread the diversity around the country. So it wasn't concentrated in the Manawatu as it was at that time. Does the same issue still apply 15 to 20 years later? Does that diversity of electricity generation throughout the country rather than concentration? Is that still an issue?
Yeah, it is, and it's been mitigated to some extent because there has been a spread, but what's overlooked is the enormous potential effect of single households all having power. So if you go through Europe and countries like Turkey and you see every house has got panels on its roof, and that has major effects in terms of total power supply. And also, if they're hybrid, they can choose to use the power themselves or load it onto the grid. But the key factors, they use the power directly themselves. So it mitigates large scale schemes if everyone did it. So there's a whole lot of uncertainties, balls up in the air, and it's.
Do we know yet in a New Zealand context what impact that's having?
Well, it's a moving feast. I'm not expert enough to. All I can say is it's a beggar's muddle. Yeah. So there's inherent risks in large scale investments that haven't locked in as many of the variables as they can.
You referred to the regional perspective versus the national perspective, and I'm aware that some of the solar farms, and I think you talked about Lodestone, where others that are supplying directly to, that's what you're talking about here. So the likes of Ryman's, for example, may buy their power directly from that solar farm.
Orion don't buy power, they just supply.
Ryman's.
Oh, Ryman's big.
Yeah, Ryman's.
Yes. Yeah, well, Lodestone have just done a agreement, just an energy used yesterday, I think, the supply arrangement with the Pink Bats manufacturing, which they're using power, which to me is smart.
And that's what you're talking about, yeah, in terms of the regional benefits.
Yeah.
My question stemming from that is, do they get a benefit in terms of price?
No, but it means that they get a benefit in terms of surety of supply. They get a benefit in terms of the asset that's in the district, serves the district, doesn't serve overseas owners, and it's just a lot more sensible and more attractive model to my view. And I'm sure the Huranui district will be in the same camp.
Okay, so the benefits that you're talking about are in terms of constant supply, security, rather than value. There's not a cheaper, they don't get a cheaper price, such.
No, but the capital that's invested in it, the return stays in the district. People in the district benefit from supply.
So I'm just going back to your original submission, and you've talked a lot about, I think you talked in this and you talked in that about the proximity to the solar farm and the fact that you looked down on it visually. If it was only on that upper terrace on the far side, would that materially change your view?
Yeah, obviously, yeah. The less of the effect, the better, yeah.
I think you've covered my question about what you were planting. So, can you tell us what the natives you were planting were?
Oh, they're a mix. I'll just use the common names. There's Kanuka, Kohuhu, Kowhai, Help Me Jacks, Riverwood. Yeah.
We'll be able to see them today. When
We are
go
seeing
visit.
them.
You'll see them.
So,
Yeah.
yeah,
But you're finding,
You'll be driving through our property.
I'll pick them out, yeah.
he's the expert on the layperson on that one. You do some more.
Oh, look, I could ask you lots and lots of questions about network, but I think we've covered what we need to. Actually, I'm just going to go back to the point Commissioner Crystal raised, that, you know, if the solar farm wasn't on those low terraces, what's your elevation compared to the top terrace? You know, do you look down on that top terrace, or are you roughly the same elevation?
Yeah, roughly the same elevation as the top terrace. Is three or four terraces. The top terrace is, well, it's a long way away. It's over by the road.
Yeah. And so therefore you would be looking across panels in that respect rather than down on the face of the panels.
If it was just on that top.
On the top one.
Of that final, yeah.
Yeah. So therefore the scale of the proposal perceptually would be quite reduced, even if because that top terrace is still very large, but perceptually from your perspective, it would be reduced because you wouldn't see the extent of it. You'd probably only see maybe the first or second row.
Yeah.
That'd be right?
Yeah, no, well, that's obviously right, yeah.
Okay.
It's a rhetorical question, isn't it?
No, I guess so. I'm just trying to think whether that's the case. So we'll see when we go this afternoon. You talked about solar farms, and they were smaller scale in France, and how they were sort of mixed in with planting.
Yeah.
I mean, that is the approach that the applicants tried to take here, that they've got the terraces.
Because of that, right? No way, you're dreaming.
So say that again.
I said not with 500 acres.
Right. So what you're talking about is the proportion of panels to the planting is not correct, not the same as what you said.
The proportion of the panels to the size of the district too. If you go up on top of Mount Cass, look at the whole area, it's a big chunk of the Waipara Basin.
Yes.
It's not insignificant, it's significant.
Okay.
My view is you can't do it sympathetically at that scale.
Right.
Size. And that's the point I'm making. In
Yes.
France, they do it sympathetically.
Yeah.
And the effect is minimised.
So I guess if we go on from that, then in order to provide the same amount of electricity, we would need a lot more solar farms. So rather than it being concentrated into one solar farm, you would find that as you're perhaps driving along a state highway, that there's one there, there's one there, there's one there, there's one there.
Yeah, well, that's if you're talking solar farms per se, but if you think it through, if every dairy farm had a system like us, you wouldn't need solar farms for a start.
Right.
So there's a whole lot of variables at play. And there's a lot of governments overseas have incentives, and if you go to America, the state governments, incentives they've worked out what they want, and whereas New Zealand's just, it's all bloody free tumble and rumble at the moment.
So that's back to your bottom-up approach of thinking about.
And to me, it's a much safer long-term strategy.
Here's a specific load. How can we solve that load problem locally? Is what you're really saying.
Yes, and if it's done cumulatively over the whole country, the end result's the same.
Same.
Along the way, regional participants haven't been thrown out of the equation and had costs on them and no benefits.
Yes.
So it's all a matter of cost benefit, really. And my argument is we're bearing all the costs, we being the people of the Hurunui district, and getting no benefit. And to me, it's a fundamental issue.
And so go back to what
take aside all the landscape effects. To me, there's a if you talk resource economics, there's a fundamental issue here.
I think that's sort of what Mr. Trelaw was saying in a slightly different way, that there's a policy issue here about how to grow electrical infrastructure in the country.
Yeah, and we're all guessing at the moment.
Yes.
Which is to the government's detriment, in my view. But that's what it is what it is. But nonetheless, I just think a much safer strategy, if you're a planner, would be to bottom up, because you're taking the people with you.
Yeah.
But if it's top down, you ain't taking them with you. Simple as that.
No, that's, I
So
understand.
is
Yeah.
that partially then the problem with having a national policy statement on this? It's top down.
I couldn't, I don't know the policies, I can't comment really, but all I know as a participant in the industry, there's one hell of a lot of thinking to be done. And we could get it disastrously wrong, or we could get it right, and there's precedent in other countries that are doing it bottom up and it's working well. That's all I can say.
So within New Zealand at the moment, are you seeing there's two sort of categories
Yes, I am.
happening at the moment?
You bet. Yeah, you bet. And I can, for instance, Lodestone versus Far North Solar. Simple as that.
Well, and I think the one that Commissioner Bray referred to, the Todd Energy one on the Napier Taupo Road, which would be another example of a very large one.
Yeah.
Yeah. And does the same apply with wind? Same issue occurring?
Yes, yep, you bet.
Yeah. And what about hydro?
It's the same.
Or is that more of a battery storage issue?
Well, hydro is equivalent to a battery storage, but there's, if I think of the Buller area, which I know really well, they're developing a local hydro scheme which is going to benefit the community, which I'm fully supportive of. And to me, it's a very smart way of doing it, because you've got the local people supporting it, and it benefits the country, rather than something that says, let's benefit the country, and to hell with what happens for the regional effect. It's a whole different way of thinking.
Yes, I could carry on talking about that for a while.
But you guys are right in the middle of it.
Yes. Yeah, no, I can see entirely where you're coming from.
I just wanted to ask you a question, sorry I missed it. You see that construction does not commence until such time as tree screening, as assessed by the council, when person chosen by the council. What in your view is the appropriate height?
Well, it depends if you look down or you look level. That's what these guys haven't got their head around. Yeah.
So when you
To me, the appropriate height is where you can't see the bloody thing.
appropriate height is when you can't see it. That's a yep.
And we've got the appropriate height on our home. You'll see them. We've screened our panels from our living room window and from our house. So we live what we're talking about.
Okay, well, thank you very much. It's been
Thank you. Very interesting.
Okay, we've got Miss Antle, and we've got Miss McGaw.
Some presentations been emailed.
So you are Miss
Yes, Ms. or whatever, doctor, whatever.
McGaw.
No,
Oh,
Sue.
so yeah.
So,
Can I just before you start, there's a bit of an issue we've got to raise with you and with Ms. McGaw here.
yes,
So you've indicated that you would abide by the court's code of conduct as an expert witness. Now, a lot of your evidence appears to us to be beyond the scope of your expertise, and so that creates a problem for us in terms of expert witness. You've said you abide by it, and you've said you would stay within your lane, if we could say, but you talked about glint glare and all sorts of other things which seem to us to be beyond your expertise.
So I'm not talking about the glint glare as such, but about what happens to birds. So I'm not talking about landscape or from that in that perspective, or how it affects things of landscape nature or something that's covered by other people. So only in respect to how does this affect the corridor of the birds and the current threatened species birds in that respect.
I think if you stick within that, your ecological expertise, that's fine, but can't go outside of that. The other question I've got to ask you is, there's a lot of cultural evidence, if we can say, within this.
Yes.
Are you speaking on behalf of mana whenua?
I have been. Janice Antle here is a very learned and high descendant from Inkau, and she has asked me to do this, and she knows that I've studied at Te Wānanga Awanui-a-Rangi, the Te Akapu Taiao, which is the environment as seen through Maori eyes, and she knows that I have been involved with Ngāi Tahu ecological things, Vision Mā Tauranga scholarship, and ongoing study about with in Waiau, for example, the Ngāi Tahu Trail. So the Ngāi Tahu people in various spots around Canterbury are well aware of my.
But you're not speaking on their behalf. That's what I'm asking.
I'm only speaking on Janice's behalf, who is Ahi Ka, and I will explain what Ahi Ka is. And so, as an Ahi Ka, a person who has kept the home fires burning and who is an ancestor. So the difference between a tangata whenua and a mana whenua, tangata whenua is the actual person, belonging, people walking on the land. Mana whenua relates to Ahi Ka. That means those people who've been on the land a long time and have a relationship and a whakapapa with it, and therefore have a obligation or authority over the land, and as such they have an obligation of caretaking and may ask people such as myself to say the words that they might otherwise not be saying themselves. So yeah. I speak for Janice as an invitation, and someone who has studied and in fact stood up and talked in this area.
You just need to clarify those issues, because obviously local Runanga are not submitters on this, and we need to make it clear where you're sitting in that space as well.
Right, so when I talk about things, I'll be talking about sort of facts as a result of research that are pertaining specifically to Janice and her experience between, say, the Waipara township where she lived as a child and the start of the Weka Pass where she currently lives and where her grandparents lived, and dates back a long time.
Okay. With those qualifications, then I think we can proceed. So
I'll start.
You're starting?
Yeah, and Sue's my expert witness.
Right, okay.
May I just also say one thing? I didn't disclose back in the day, I worked for the geothermal project at Wairake, so I have some sort there, and also in the animal research based technology department.
Okay.
So, and I have to say that Sue's very she's done a lot of research and she's very knowledgeable in things Maori, probably a lot more than me, although my spirit is there. I haven't learned Maori per se. And so I'm very grateful to Sue and her.
Just hold on a sec, we'll get Liz to come and deal to the machine.
So, you know, there are Pākehā that are actually more knowledgeable in Maori culture and Maori language, in my experience. And there are the people who do have the Maori genetic ancestry, like me. My spirit is there, but I'm a bit lazy scholastically. So that is why Sue and I work well together.
Okay.
Okay.
So you've got a statement you're going to read?
Yes, but I'm not an experienced speaker, so I have got a whole lot of notes here. I'd like to say that I really endorse what the previous speaker said. I think he's got it in a nutshell. I think that solar belongs on people's rooftops, and it should be the little people that actually get the profits of solar, not great big corporate multinationals. Okay, so If you bear with me, I'll stick to my notes, but I'll try and, talk as well. Right. Tell me the landscape in which you live, and I'll tell you who you are. This was said by a Spanish philosopher, Ortega y Gasset. The proposed huge international solar industrial complex, 300,000 solar panels over 180 hectares, does not belong in the heart of our Waipara Valley landscape. Solar panels belong on individual New Zealanders' houses and rooftops by individual choice. They should not be imposed on a massive scale by multinational corporations for their profit, eating up our New Zealand countryside and industrialising and polluting our Waipara Valley natural landscape. Now, increasingly overseas, it is controversial, these big solar plants. Like in Italy, they've been banned. There's another country they've been banned. In Britain, there is a political party that is opposed to them and wants to get rid of them. So to me, it's obsolete. It's technology that is always changing, and people's values are changing with them. They're taking a look and they're saying, do we really want this imbalance eating up our countryside? Right, my name is Janice Entel. I'm of Ngāi Tahu descent via my grandmother Flora Jacobs and Pākehā descent, dating back to the 1800s on the European side. The Entel family has lived in the Weka Pass since the 1860s and dry stock farmed along the Weka stream and its upper reaches. We've always been fairly poor, and we've had to augment our incomes through doing other things. Okay, but we still love our land, and the fact that the Entels are still there shows their love of their land. I know the Waipara Valley land and the Weka stream and the Waipara River well, because for the first 16 years of my life, I was brought up on this land and in these waterways under the shelter of Mokateri, Mount Grey. As children, with other local children, we biked, swam and explored the Waipara Valley. With my mother, a teacher and an amateur botanist, we explored the Waipara River and the lower Weka stream with its nesting dotterels and shimmering blue and green tiny butterflies. We swam in the upper Weka stream, which ran deep and mysterious with eels, with my father. He's a farmer, railway worker, insurance salesman, freezing worker, and eventually a fisherman. And he was situated in Bluff in Riverton, and he fished around Fiordland and in Vovo Strait. With my brother and sister, we often walked the Weka stream from Waipara, where we lived, to my grandparents' farm in the Weka Pass. In our garden at Waipara, my brother and I found a small green stone adze in the dirt under the pine needles, which we later lost, of course, being kids. The Maori had been there before us. We realised this. We searched for fossils. We found cockabullies and frogs and flounders and eels, and once even a salmon stranded in a pool. We had slime fights, which probably prepared us for later life. The Waipara and the Weka in flood were dangerous and awe-inspiring. Bank-to-bank waves of rushing brown water that could roll a speeding drum in the case of the Weka and take out the entrance to the Waipara Bridge in the case of the Waipara. I can say that both the Waipara River and the Weka stream have been degraded over my lifetime, both in water flow and water health. I believe it is due to the draining of aquifers and over-allocation of water. The waters are not being replenished and revitalised. The once sparkling sheets of water that children paddled in the Waipara have been reduced to a trickle. The waterholes for swimming are stagnant and no longer vibrant. The Weka is depleted and devitalised. My fear is that they will become dry riverbeds. This has already happened to much of the Waipara River. I have been told anecdotally that once upon a time, you could take a speedboat from the Waipara Gorge right down to the Waipara Bridge. Shows how much the flow has reduced in the Waipara River. It's now pathetic. little duty stream, okay? I'm in full agreement with Te Marie Tower and Sumagore that the Waipara Valley, we are dealing with a very fragile aquifer and river ecosystem and environment that must not be compromised further. Okay, my studies at university were in philosophy, education and comparative religion, religious studies. I hold the qualifications of BA Canterbury, MA Victoria, PhD jointly Victoria and Waikato. I have a published book in philosophy of religion, psychology, called Sophia Geography, Exploring Spirituality, Landscape and Archetypes in Neo-Pagan Theology. And it was a recipient of an Ashton Wiley Book Award. The bones of my submission objection have already been set out and received by the Huranui Council in first round of submissions. Sumagore is my nominated expert witness with her considerable Waipara Valley fieldwork, and I emphasise fieldwork, expertise in biodiversity, ecology, the environment, and cultural heritage research. She will put flesh on the bones of my arguments and sing up the land. And it's time that I think that we all sing up the land, as well as the weakest stream in the Waipara River. Right, the bones of my objection. The area is a known fire risk and consequently a serious toxic hazard site and threat for the residents of Waipara Valley and surrounding lands. As a child, I witnessed the flash fire on Carson's farm hill directly above the proposed solar industrial complex. I also witnessed a flash fire along the Three Deans Hills. More recently, there have been flash fires on the old Herbert's farm hills, now Caldwell's, near the proposed site. This is a known extreme fire hazard area. The fires are very difficult to contain, especially in hot northwest winds. It would be irresponsible to site any industrial solar plant here. I can't emphasise that enough. I think only if you've been resident in Waipara for some time do you realise that a small spark can set off a raging fire and an uncontrollable fire and a northwest wind. And in fact, when I went to Rangiora High School, my best friend's father was caught up in a fire and he died. So I think all the residents of Waipara live in fear of fire in hot northwest conditions because they just know that it's totally uncontrollable. As I've said before, solar panels contain toxic materials, including lead, tin, cadmium, silica, copper, which are extremely hazardous to human health and environment. The seals in solar panels can be ruptured by fire and extreme weather events. The Waipara Valley is known for extreme weather events. The damage to solar panels from fire, sparks, as well as the wind and flooding could lead to the release of toxins into the atmosphere, into soil, and into the weaker stream watercourses and Weka and Waipara aquifers. And there, in my opinion, there is no way that a huge solar industrial plant can control against these outside extreme weather events. It's a bit like an Australian arguing that the fire extinguisher in their home can counter a huge bushfire. It just doesn't work. You cannot see the solar plant in isolation from the surrounding fire risk. Financial liability for locals. Apart from the toxic health and environmental threats to locals, any personal farmer or business unintentionally causing a fire which spreads to that industrial solar plant would be liable for the cost of damage and or the destruction of the plant, as well as the environmental and human costs of the toxins released from the damaged or destroyed plant. Insurance for locals could skyrocket. This would cause locals to be financially destroyed. This is a financial and existential threat to the locals of Waipara Valley. Noise pollution. The constant industrial machine noise clicking generated by the panels as they pivot towards the sun will be an environmental irritant and human noise health hazard to those in the immediate vicinity. The district already has noise impact from frost windmills and helicopters in the valley. The Waipara Valley is known for its notoriously strong northwest winds, and as these winds are funneled and distorted by the panels and plant infrastructure, there will be constant noise, potentially loud whistling noises, which has been found amongst city buildings after they've been built, that there is a noise hazard, which will be difficult to remedy once the plant is in situ. There is the risk of damage to the panels by wind, which could cause further noise clattering, as well as leaching of toxic materials into the atmosphere and underground water and reservoirs beneath the Waipara Valley. Now, the solar heat island effect, there is international evidence that solar industrial complexes create a solar heat island effect, adversely affecting surrounding rural horticulture, viticulture and farming. Anecdotally, in Morocco, local traditional farming in the next valley to the solar industrial plant has been severely affected. Viticulture in particular is very terroir dependent, weather, seasonal and soil dependent. One study has found the solar heat island effect to result in heat increases of around 3 to 4 degrees centigrade, unpleasant for people, but destructive to pre-existing established horticulture, agriculture and viticulture businesses. Soil health can be degraded by the solar heat island effect through biological carbon cycling. It would not make sense to jeopardise Waipara Valley viticulture, vineyards and internationally recognised Pinot Noir, e.g. Greystone, Blacks, Pegasus Bay, Mountford and Bell Hill. And Jancis Robinson has talked about the importance of Waipara as a potential great Pinot Noir growing place. In an established and increasingly recognised Waipara wine growing region, for the sake of a non-local and foreign-owned huge 180 hectare, 300,000 solar panel industrial complex in the heart of the Waipara Valley. Now, our farm, we have QE2 national protection and special natural protected areas. Now, a few years ago, when I came back to the farm, around about 2000, our father sold it to us. We were under pressure from council, and it was not just the Huranui Council, but farmers were encouraged to conserve any native plants, any natural features, and I welcomed this and I endorsed it and went straight and did it. You know, other farmers were reluctant because they were thinking of their business, but we actually welcomed this, and some other farmers did too. These special natural protected areas are next for the proposed solar industrial complex at the north end. These areas were designated under Section 6C of the Resource Management Act 1991, which required that as a matter of national importance, local authorities recognised and provide for the protection of areas of significant Indigenous vegetation and significant habitats of Indigenous fauna. And this is what I've got to sue for, really. Entles Farm also has QE2 National Trust protected sites. The proposed Waipara Valley Industrial Complex has the potential to destroy habitats and endanger wildlife. Internationally, industrial solar plants are known to kill birds, as has happened in Southern California. They've now completely taking out, I think, one of the hugest solar farms in United States, if not the world. And it was partly it was due to outdated technology and it's not being competitive, but another major issue was birds getting scorched and falling to the ground because of the solar island heat effect. Nature tourism to this area of the Hiranui Waipara Valley will be destroyed. Special natural protected areas and Hui2 national protection sites in the Waipara Valley of the Hiranui will be undermined and threatened. Ngāi Tahu Taonga, cultural treasures and historical heritage. Ngāi Tahu and pre-Ngāi Tahu peoples have a cultural and strong traditional heritage in the Hiranui Waipara Valley. The Weka Pass Trail, Punamu Greenstone Trail went via the Waipara Valley and the Weka Pass to Waikari. You can see the rock drawings up there. And the Upper Hiranui Saddle, which is now known as Harper's Pass, and then down the Taramaka River to the west coast, which led the Punamu treasure hunters on to the greenstone-rich Arahura River. Greenstone artifacts have been found in the Waipara Valley. John McCaskey will talk about this. Janice and John Antler's children found a greenstone adze in Waipara, which was where we lived. The non-local proposed foreign industrial solar plant will industrialise this area and detract from this Hiranui Waipara Valley's special Ngāi Tahu Taonga status. The huge land area proposed for the industrial solar plant should be bought, in my opinion, by the Hiranui Council and offered back to Ngāi Tahu at cost, because they do have claims in this area. They do have grievances in this area dating back to the 1800s, whereby their land was taken from them, virtually, was robbed from them at cost. Alternatively, it should be restricted for use for Hiranui Waipara Valley traditional farming, olives, horticulture, viticulture, and wine making activities and truffles. The basis on which the land was sold by the previous farmers and bought by the present owner. Property prices of surrounding farms and vineyards will be destroyed. International experience indicates property prices in the immediate vicinity of the complex will be reduced by as much as 50% from current market value. Money and livelihoods will be taken out of the local Waipara Valley and Hiranui community, who wants to live next to a huge industrial solar plant. The non-local owned land and international company will be the financial winner at considerable cost to the locals. The Hiranui Council and Environment Canterbury must protect the financial and existential interests of the local population who they represent. Glint and glare. The glint and glare from the proposed Waipara Valley industrial solar plant will affect not only local residents, but also tourism and all who pass through this Hiranui special natural area, vineyards, olive groves, and traditional sheep farming. This will make for an unpleasant experience, destroying the natural beauty of the Waipara Valley. The Weka Pass rail tourist experience will be adversely affected. Who wants to travel in a vintage train alongside a huge acreage of potentially toxic industrial solar plant? Tourists to New Zealand want an agrarian experience, not an industrial experience. Many tourists come to New Zealand to get away from heavily industrialised societies. As well, the glint and glare will reduce property prices and quality of living for local Hiranui and Waipara Valley residents. Now, the significant hazard of toxic waste. It is doubtful the Hiranui Council could carry the burden of toxic waste from the proposed Waipara Valley industrial solar plant, especially in the event of the proposed huge solar corporate business failing or being resold, as has happened overseas and is increasingly happening as far as I can see. Because the technology is changing, the financial basis of it is changing. Who is legally liable for cleaning up the environmental mess? The lifespan of the 300,000 solar panels is approximately 25 years. This has the potential to generate a vast amount of toxic waste. While recycling is possible, it costs 10 to 30 times more to recycle and to send them to the landfill. Can the local Waipara Valley landfill cope with this toxic waste? Will another landfill have to be built? What will be the financial burden on the council and the local ratepayers of this huge increase in toxic waste? Internationally, it is a concern that the solar industry generates significant amounts of toxic waste, primarily due to the presence of hazardous materials such as lead, cadmium, and other heavy metals in solar panels. This waste poses environmental and health risks, especially when panels are not properly recycled or disposed of. As the number of solar panels in use grows, so does the challenge of managing the end-of-life waste, with current recycling efforts being economically unviable and insufficient to handle the projected volume. My contention is that the Huranui Council is not capable, and nor should it be, of handling the waste problems this huge proposed solar industrial site would bring to the future of Waipara Valley. And okay, I've told you about the toxic components, lead and cadmium, which can leach into the environment if not properly managed. Recycling is expensive and complex and often exceeds the value of the recovered materials. So recycling, I don't think, is necessarily an option, leading to most panels leading up into the landfills. Regulatory efforts, some regions like California and Washington are implementing regulations to manage solar panel waste, but a comprehensive solution remains elusive. Environmental impact. The toxic waste from solar panels is estimated to be 300 times more than from nuclear energy per unit of energy produced, raising concerns about long-term environmental effects. So my conclusion is the proposed Waipara Valley Solar Industrial Complex brings no benefit to the local Huranui and Waipara Valley community, who the Huranui Council and Environment Canterbury represent. The proposal has considerable downside and risks. It has the real risk of fire, toxic waste, and is an extreme human and environmental hazard. It risks trashing an increasingly recognised Waipara Valley wine growing landscape region and its local people who have invested blood, sweat and tears, in many cases their life savings and work, into their love of their land and their agriculture and viticulture based businesses. And you could say truffle businesses as well here. I mean, it's a developing viticulture and horticultural region. This pertains for generations of people who have lived in the landscape of Waipara Valley and the Huranui district. And it, in particular, it risks our waterways and aquifers. So, as Ortega Eager said, tell me the landscape in which you live, and I will tell you who you are. But I'll now pass over to Sue.
Answer the questions first.
Probably got a few questions for you before we do that. Can you refer to some of your land being in QE2 trust protection?
Yes.
Can you tell us what it is, what's protected?
Well, there is the rock formations, the shell formations.
Right.
And you can go to the QE2 site and I think Sue will tell you more, but there's the Mullumbekkia. I think there's about 10 different types of Mullumbekkia, which we've called the site after my mother, the Alison Antle Mullumbekkia site, and it actually goes flush with where they propose to stick the solar panels, you know, at the very end of the farm. So we're not too happy about that. And I think there was a considerable bit that went, you'd have to talk to people at QE2, alongside the creeks, further up the valley, yes. And I think there's more down near the railway. You could get the maps from QE2.
Okay. Is it still grazed?
Yes, it is. Yeah, but areas have been fenced off by QE2.
Right. Okay.
It's not the QE2 bits are not grazed.
Yeah, no, the QE2 bits are not grazed.
Right.
They have been fenced off, so they can't be grazed. So we've lost land. Some farmers would say, oh, well, you know, that was a bit stupid of you. But other farmers who are increasingly supporting QE2 are welcoming it and are fencing off areas.
And is it available to the public?
I think on when permission is requested.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
I was just keen to just get clear in my mind exactly where your property is.
Well,
So you're on obviously the Waipara.
yes,
So your dwelling is sort of as you go over on the left.
yes,
Yeah.
you know where the dam is?
Yeah.
Yeah, the Glenmark Dam,
Yeah.
or the Glenmark scheme. Yes, it's up the hill. So actually, we would look down on the solar
Yes.
plant.
And then does the farm itself come down onto the terrace?
That, yes,
So you essentially on the northern boundary of,
yes,
so that paddock on the right-hand side of State Highway
yeah.
7 as you're going in, you go past the solar farm, that paddock's part of your farm.
Yes.
And that's where the Kiwi2 covenant is.
Yes,
One
that's
of
where
three, isn't it?
yes, that's where the Molenbeekia one is, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And does your farm go across the creek as well? Like,
Yes.
so you own
Both sides of the creek and above the railway line. So
and above the railway line?
yeah, so it's quite a lot of hills in it.
Yeah.
And then there's flats along the road, yeah.
Okay, that's helpful. We did hear evidence yesterday, or there was some discussion yesterday about perhaps, whether dwellings might be built, close to the solar farm.
Yes, well, we've got succession plans as well, our daughter, we've got a son and a daughter. The son wants to continue with the land and he wants to farm it. But at the moment, we've got somebody who leases the land.
Right.
And our son works in town and is actually studying law, and he's actually got a degree.
And so if they were to build, would the natural place to be built up the hills, or would you
Well, the bit that we were thinking of letting our daughter have is on the flat right next to the solar.
Right.
And it's the permission has gone a fair way through. So this, she sure as hell doesn't want the solar farm right up against her,
No. Okay.
or anybody else that, maybe buys it from her. Yeah. So it does affect us adversely.
Yeah.
And also there's a beautiful creek that runs very close to that proposed solar thing. And you go down there and you just go down there to meditate. People love it. And the water is beautiful,
That's the Weka Creek.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you don't want to be hearing whistling and clattering and you just don't want it nearby. So we don't want it up the north end either. Thanks very much. It can go somewhere else. I think the person who suggested that solar farms should belong in industrial areas, they're not farms. They're industrial. They're made of whatever they're made of, but it's not a natural biological material, and it contains toxins, and it's a fucking fire risk. People don't seem to realise how much. I actually dread summer and the northwest winds because I remember the out of control fires that were around the hills when I was a kid. I was terrified. Think of Australian bushfires. They were just racing along the hills. So it's not the place for a huge, great big solar industrial complex.
Okay, that's all the questions I have at the moment. I think we might come back to you.
Yep.
I don't know, is there a power source here? My battery goes, do I get that?
You need power?
Oh, well, it'll be all right for a while. So,
Just might pay to plug it in now before we start. You're going to summarise through your evidence and then we can come back to questions?
Yep.
Okay.
So I've got two things that are going to go on.
You just need to pull that microphone over.
Oh, sorry,
I've also got to do, is the Zoom, can you give us a second?
Yeah.
Zoom connection.
While we're waiting for that, Ms. Antle, another question. Are you aware of the other solar farm proposal at the end of Bain Road?
I've heard rumours. I'm not really aware of the specifics.
You're not aware of that one?
No, but if it's taking water out of the Waipara aquifers and the Waipara aquifers, I mean, I think all those aquifers are joined at a very deep level. And apparently, I mean, I'm no expert, but I do know that there are surface aquifers and then there are very, very deep ones that are very, very ancient. And I have heard that they're being depleted.
Right.
So we don't have any.
Yeah, I don't know about the water there.
Yeah.
I was just more interested.
Would oppose it, definitely, even although it won't be such an eyesore for us, and some people may support it, but I don't, because I agree with Mr. Lee that solar panels have their place and it's on people's roofs and it's by individual choice. And I've got a cousin in Taranaki who's had them, he's a greenie, and he's had them on his roof for a long time, and he just feeds the surplus power back into the main thing, you know. I think bottom up is better, you know.
Yes.
And maybe there is a place for huge industrial plants, but I'd say out in the middle of the Australian desert, which is feeding directly into a mine or something like that. But I don't think New Zealand as a whole is going to be, it's going to be an advantage to New Zealand's branding and its clean green image and tourism, which actually expects that. They don't expect to see a sea of solar panels all over the countryside. And in Britain, they're increasingly, there's now a new political party that is totally opposing them, an up-and-coming political party, because they say it's just eating up the British countryside. You know, we've got to make choices in the end, and technology becomes obsolete, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And it can leave lasting environmental problems. Yeah, that's my position on solar plants. Yeah, and I think
I think your presentation's up, Mr. Gore. So.
Yeah,
right. Trying to make the thing go up and down and get that out of the way. Hide it. Okay. Well, are we still morning? We're just gone. Good afternoon, I guess now. Right. Okay. Well, I'm Susan Christine McGaw, and I'm along here with Janice today, and I'm hoping this technology is going to work. So I'm a senior conservation and biodiversity specialist with 50 years more of experience in ecological field work across multiple regions, and I know that you've got my evidence there, so I'm not going to go through the entire document, but I will also note that while I briefly said and I have worked a lot in the Waipara Basin and the Weka Stream, and I've contributed major ecological projects all over the place. And when I taught at Lincoln University, I was actually teaching in the landscape department, teaching plan specifications, planning, leisure and plant ID and revegetation and restoration. So I was across that kind of information. And I confirm compliance with the expert witness code of conduct. And I'm responding to the key issues addressed by Dr. Janice Antle and those of fire risk and toxic hazards from solar panel damage in relation to the environment, toxic materials, extreme weather vulnerability in the Waipara Basin, solar heat island effects as they affect environmental issues, impacts on viticulture, horticulture, and agriculture and biodiversity, and the disruption of internationally recognised greening of Waipara biodiversity networks, effects on Kiwi2 areas, wildlife habitat, the Kaitahu cultural values, taonga, heritage, and archaeological sites, flint and glare impacts as related to the environment, and hazardous waste and end-of-life management concerns, not so much going there because it's been covered by others. The site familiarity, I've had experience working in the Waipara Basin since 2005, and I've lived locally, relocated from the earthquake situation since 2011, and I have a 25-year photographic flora and fauna record of the area. During last summer, I walked the Weka Stream Terrace with Ahika, Dr. Janice Antle, Ms. Kelsey, and Makareni Rupini from Ecan, tracing the historic Pounamu Trail, observing the water, which was drying up, I might add, flora and fauna, experience the Maori, the life essence, and challenges of that place. So what I propose to do today as part of my evidence is iwi acknowledgements, Ahika, Dr. Janice Antle acknowledgement. Then I'm going to just give the brief ecological statement. I have a photo essay. I'm going to sort of delve back and hop into that because I think pictures sort of say 1,000 words. And then the two historic and contemporary background and the science background in Tauranga Maori and water values, an overall conclusion and a little bit more of the photo essay. So that's my plan today. Mō tātou a mō ka uri a muri ake nei, for us and our children after us. And this next saying it was central in Kemp's deed, reflecting thought, ko mātou kāinga no hoanga, ko a mātou mahinga kai, me waiho marie mo a mātou tamariki, mo muri hoi a mātou. Our places of residence, cultivation, food gathering places must still be left for us, for ourselves and our children after us. Iwi acknowledgement. I acknowledge the iwi and hapu of Kaitahu and Katikuri, Kati Rangi Amoa and Kati Tuahuriri, on whose traditional lands they live and work, as well as all tangata whenua past, present and emerging, whose lands have been traversed in the preparation of this evidence. Paying our respects to elders in their communities, we thank traditional owners for their ongoing custodianship and for their support in looking at preserving intrinsic Tauranga values into the future. Ahika acknowledgement, Dr. Janice Antle. Ahika, Dr. Janice Antle, descender of Flora Jacobs of Abner Clough, James Robertson Clough. I said it wrong the other day. Huai Maktareni Tuhaiwa, Riteka Tuhaiwa, Kaitahu Iwikau, signatory of the Treaty of Waitangi, Kati Rangi Amoa, Kati Tuahuriri, local landowner and local history advisor. Ahika comes from the imagery of burning the fires of occupation, of keeping the fires burning in turn, establishes obligations and authority over whenua, land. This concept implies a long connection to land, ancestry, and is about vitality and responsibility of protecting and maintaining the homeland, which is Janice's job. The tūpuna of Janice walked Te Ara Pounamu, the greenstone pathway, in the very same footsteps that she and I can walk today along the Weka Stream and its closer terraces. Indeed, many times as she was growing up, Janice and her sister and brother, I'm sitting over there, left their parents' home in Waipara of a morning to walk up Weka Stream. They were given sausages and pine needles so they could light a fire in the centre of the riverbed, and they were given very clear instructions as to how to put it out afterwards. And they just carried on tootling up the river, up the stream. And I'm going to call it a stream because in the early maps it is a stream because there was plenty of water. I'm not going to say it's a creek, it's a stream. And the Waipara River was a Waipara River. Anyway, they walked up to their grandparents' home at the start of the Weka Pass. And I'm privileged to have been asked by Janice to speak on her behalf of matters pertaining not only to ecology, but of kaitahu Kāti Tuahuriri, tikanga, values, heritage, wairoa, and water. Right, so just going to do this opening ecological statement and then going into the pictures. The Waipara Valley is a unique inland ecological basin shaped by the dryland climate, whoops, can you hear me? Bowl-shaped topography and intersecting ecological districts. Weka Stream is a critical ecological corridor linking vineyards, waterways, native plantings, and dryland habitats. The Greening of Waipara program has created 70 plus biodiversity nodes back in the day, nearly 20 years, forming functional ecological corridors supporting birds, lizards, insects, native plants. And you can double that now because all the community get excited about this project and all those nodes have doubled. But over 20 years of local community, national, international efforts and lots of dollars, the proposed 180 plus hectare solar installation would fragment the habitat, disrupt species movement and undermine 2 decades of ecological restoration. The site is fire prone and subject to extreme weather conditions, including high winds, 150 k's, I might add, from last October, with abrasive material with a potential to create a high risk of toxic contamination from the abrased, damaged solar panels. The area contains significant cultural heritage, including traditional kaitahu travel routes, mahinga kaya sites, middens, adzes, moa bones, and potentially kumara pits, and Te Mairi said to me the other day, Te Kauka pits. The proposal is incompatible with the ecological, cultural, and environmental character of the Waipara Valley. Yeah. That. And go to share. Share. Right. Some pictures. Okay, can you actually see that screen, or have you got it in front of you, or?
In front of us, we've got it in front of us.
Okay, all right, so you can see my little cursor going round and round there. This is a picture taken from the top of Mount Cass, looking up towards, looking across the Waipara, little basin there, and you can see some hills on the other side. It is clearly a basin. It is clearly a valley, and in this piece here, this is the Weka Stream area in through here. So I was part, I like this picture here. I call that the Guardian. So Tina Troop, Peter Langlands, myself, and this gentleman here, we went up to the mountain, left 2 o'clock, drove till 3 o'clock, walked to the top of the mountain till 4 o'clock, and then we were there to observe the migrating species, see if there was some migrating species, rare threatened birds crossing over the on the top of the Mount Cass to the Totra Peak. We also did the same thing out in the out at the sea. But that taught me a lot. We were up there looking down on the valley, observing the weather, and we were there because of the recognition of the bird species being present in the valley. Now, this is this picture on the left. This is from 2010, and those sort of crisscross things are vineyards back then, 20 years. Now, that is doubled in size. That's doubled in size, and just to get an idea, my cursor's coming up the Waipara River, and this piece here is where the proposed solar installation is, and as you can see, that's crosswise right across the middle of this viticultural area. Now, this picture on the right here is really important because the out-of-town people who write, you know, what's going on in our district, and they're out of town, they don't really know what's going on in our district. They just sort of looked online and said, oh, yes, we think Weka Road, oh, yes, that's in the Waikari ecological district. Can you see my cursor hopping up and down there? That's red bit there, that's where the Waipara village is, and that's the road that goes off to the Weka Pass and the Waikari. And what we're saying here is that the influences that are within our bowl of Waipara, they're influences of 4 ecological districts. One of them is Motunau here on the right. We have the Christchurch Low Plains, and it's really important to understand that because as Colin said earlier, less than 0.5% of remaining native vegetation, or certainly less than 1, not in the case of Waikari ecological district, where the figure is less than 10%. So it's quite erroneous to think that we've got, that there's still 10% of natural vegetation. So this Waikari ecological district goes way out to Howard and goes over the hill, goes into a completely different geological basin. It's higher, it's about 200 to 300 metres above sea level on the basin itself. And then, of course, it climbs higher and it goes to the Hurunui. It's completely different. It has no relationship. And then the description of what goes on in terms of agriculture and horticulture is all relevant to the Amuri Basin and has no relevance to the Waipara Basin. And the fourth ecological district is that the Waipara looks up at Mount Grey. Mount Grey has a profound, Mount Kateri has profound Ngāi Tahu significance. The waterways of the Waipara stream and its catchments, which include the Weka stream and the Omihi, they are all important influencing factors. So here is that little meeting of 4 ecological districts, and we have a very unique basin right there. I'm looking, and I'm just going to flick into here. This is those dots, or those stars, all the early 70 locations that were the beginning of the Greening of Waipara program, and I can't do a squiggly line on there. So I just had to make do with a text box saying here, so you know that the proposed solar installation is right in the middle of this science internationally recognised program. All right, I'm going to zoom back to, so we've talked about this ecological district, and we've talked about, well, where are these things? Where is all these vineyards? So take that picture and double it, and you'll have a good idea. So Miss Kelsey's place must be right out there in the middle. Now this here shows the routes from Christchurch. This is Kahuru Manu. So Ngāi Tahu have done a cultural atlas and mapping, and they are showing here this, I know, slightly faded green line, but these are the traditional routes that were undertaken by their ancestors. And the most important one we have here is at bottom middle, that's the Waipara River coming up here, meeting at Waipara. And then this long straight piece along here, that's about 4.85 kilometres. The main road to the Weka Pass is on the left, the Weka stream is on the right, and this is the area that the proposed solar industrial complex wants to what did someone say? 300,000 panels, multiply that by 4, is it? Four posts per panel? Anyway, well over 1 million posts going into the ground in places where potentially a lot of artifacts. So this is the major Poanamu Trail route to the west coast, and also it comes up to Waiau, meets another track from there, goes up over the Lake Sumner in Taramako, or it goes north into the Molesworth and up into either Blenheim or Nelson Radio. So here's a bit of a close-up. This is the that top corner. Here we have these green bits here, I think, on this solar panel thing. That's their indication of some terraces. And over here, where that nosy look kind of boundary is, we have some Weka Creek. And here we have, again, a close-up of the Ngaitahu Heritage Trail, which, as you can see, goes straight through that paddock here. And it's these sort of paddocks in these areas where Matagauri, where the terrace and fragile Kowhais and Mullumbekea were, and artifacts found, I think in the 1930s. John McCaskey, who'll talk tomorrow, he'll talk about the findings of the middens and all that kind of thing. But as you can clearly see, that this is a very important cultural trail, and it's running right through this space. I want to talk about the greening of Waipara, and I was talking to my neighbour yesterday, and he said, well, what is the greening of Waipara? So I don't know who's talked to you before, but on page 16 of my evidence, there was quite a good explanation of what the greening of Waipara is. So raised the ecological profile of the Waipara Valley locally, nationally and internationally, and attracted significant public funding for the biodiversity enhancement. And I might just say that the Hurunui District Council, there's their car there, they were supporting this at the time. They had a biodiversity officer, and then I also was partially funded, plus the use of the car there. There was a lot of school involvement. The 70 sites, some while they were landowners, were sites like the play centres, the fire station, beside the railway station, and the money that has gone in over the last 20 years. I mean, it must be well over $1 million. While I was working, I was asked to write a funding application just for 100,000, and I was not the only person writing applications. The Lincoln University, we have a group come from Florida University every year because they're studying this, because this is widely recognised as a model of sustainable viticulture with all these. What's happened is that by planting the nodes, it's encouraged the insects. And once upon a time, people did plantings by the calendar. So that's changed. Now people do integrated pest management, which is spraying and pesticide use by the calendar, or integrated pest management, where you do it because there's a pressure, or you don't do it at all, or you use something else. And in the case of Waipara, it's encouraged all kinds of variations of biodiversity styles of vineyard or horticultural management. In some cases, this horticultural management is to the degree that it's organic, so that you can buy a $130 bottle of wine, because this is the label and the image that's now expressed from this particular little basin is of a clean green image, and all these good biodiversity services happening. And what happened over the last 20 years is that not only the landowners, the original landowners, have put beneficial planting nodes that then encourage the birds and the insects that are predatory and so on, that all the other people have been doing planting. And so the valley as a whole has reduced its entire pesticide use. Every little bit has it's had a social effect, not just a physical effect, the social effect of what's happening with our valley. And so there's a picture here of the Mihi school. They grew their own plants and they were so proud of their of the signage, internationally recognised signage and biodiversity trails in these parts. There's an early picture of, as someone said, so much community involvement, so much maintenance, so much heart has gone on. And here is another picture taken from Mountford, and that's the Weka stream in through there, and you can clearly see that bowl-like nature. And it's not the Waipara basin isn't that big, but it is a basin, nice basin like this. And the proposal is to cut it in half and stop those corridors that are so important, not only socially, but economically as well, the tourist, but this whole group, huge, wider community, ecosystem, beneficial services and things like that. And here is a picture. There's Waipara there where my cursor is going around and around. And the Ngāi Tahu people place a great deal of importance on their custodianship of the Waipara River and its catchments. So here's the Waipara River. So the catchments, here's in this map, it is called creek, but in earlier maps it's called stream. And we have the Mihi stream and others. And anything affecting the water in the catchments affects the water in the Waipara. And at one stage, the esteemed North Island people were looking at our district, said, oh, there wasn't anything here much. There wasn't any threatened species. So these two pictures here, just to prove to you that these are from the iNaturalist websites. And on the left, we've got photographic observations of Kārearea, which incidentally, the New Zealand falcon was New Zealand Bird of the Year last year. It's recognised as being on the threatened endangered species list. There's all kinds of categories of degrees of threatened and endangered. Does anyone know the exact notification? I'm not sure. I think I've written it somewhere else. But on any given day, you can go in the Waipara Valley and see one because they're all around. And I am going to just zoom down to here. Right, so this is a map that this is a plot that I did when I worked for the Greening a Waipara program. And as I walked around all the 70 sites or 50 sites, I would ask the landowners, have you seen, is the New Zealand falcon on your property? Because at that time, Dale McKinty was doing the Falcon Project, and so I'd ask the question. And then what surprised me was when I went, having talked to landowners who had native planting on their place, I went home and I plotted where they'd said they'd seen them. And what I found was this flight path in a straight line. So just to get, so where that centre of the circle is, that's the Waipara village. The line that looks like a weird kind of a kotoku, that's just roughly a line showing where to correspond with where those 50 or 70 nodes of planting were. And if I just move my cursor up and down, that's where the proposed solar installation is, right bang in the middle, right across the Falcon flight path. And here we have from this, so you may have heard of Te Ara Kariki, that's the pathway that goes from the mountains up near Colgate on the Canterbury Plains, across the plains down to Lake Ellesmere. So what they say is that if the birds fly about 4 kilometres, then that's about the distance that minimum distance that you need your plantings. So what we find here is on we've got this nice little bowl happening, and on the edge of the bowl we have lots and lots of rare plants and lots of pigeons. So we know that they can move around. But what's interesting is that the white heron is now also using this flight path. So it sneaks off from Okarito and down through the Waimak, and then skirts around Mount Thomas and Maungateri, and then goes up towards Mountford. So again, the white heron is taking this route right here, right across where a proposed Glinty Glary, dare I say it, 4 kilometre long, 4.8 kilometres is it long, solar industrial plant is proposed. So just back to the picture where I left off, the one picture on the right, they also, it was intimated that there weren't any plants of any great note or species, or no species of note. And that picture there is just a snapshot from iNaturalist. And I just typed in threatened plant species and plenty of them came up, and those are only the ones that have been observed. If you were to turn to the back of my evidence in the page 56, you will see that there's a list of 120 local species that are proposed for suitability in this area as a revegetation planting. Mind you, that those plants then become, you have to look at the landform and the soil, of course, but these are all plants that would have once been present in the district. I got anything else to say? Not sure. Just a minute. Okay. Yeah. Sorry, I'm just a bit slow. Yeah. Okay. Historic and contemporary background. The Waipara Valley is nationally recognised for wine production and biodiversity leadership. The proposed solar plant would sit across the existing vineyards and biodiversity nodes, disrupting ecological linkages and flight paths. The threatened species, including Karearea, the New Zealand falcon, are indeed present. There are a lot of them. And in my evidence, you will have seen that the dotterel, ribel, the pied stilt, the falcon, lots and lots of things are all here. And lots of plants, some of them are mentioned, but there's too many to go into it in great detail. And the Greening of Waipara initiative has received major national and international support and scientific investment. I mean, a lot of investment. Archaeological evidence confirms long-term Maori occupation, including potentially kumara pits, middens, and certainly middens, seen, ovens, artefacts, moa bones, and the development footprint overlaps directly with the Kaitahu Poanamu Greenstone Trail, as I showed you in that picture. Mākauranga Māori and water values. Kaitahu iwi management plans emphasise protection of waterways, Maori, mahinga kai, and cultural landscapes. And it's just so well documented. And again, I touched on it or alluded to it, and I know Te Maori Tau has talked about it. Weka Stream and the Waipara River are recognised as taonga, requiring precautionary management. And the concerns include, and we've heard it over and over again, degradation of water quality, low flows, groundwater, surface water interactions, cultural impacts. ECAN's Waipara environmental strategy reinforces the need to respect land capability, water limits, and cultural. Now, can I switch? And cultural landscapes. Yeah, land capability, water limits, and I might add, no, I'll come with that about the aquifer levels. In some cases, some of these historic wells are only 12 metres deep. Up at Elizabeth Kelsey's place, there's certainly 12-metre historical well, and then down at the township itself, 12 metres, 13 metres. And when you're standing down at that midway place, you can see that the first little terrace is around about, say, 10 metres. So that would indicate to me that the water goes so far, and then a lot of it goes underground. And for this reason, if there's any toxic leaching or the soil becomes compacted underneath those panels with a greater runoff, that because of this, a very shallow aquifer, then it becomes very high risk of impact at that time. There are other aquifers. I think the next well level is about 150 metres. I'm not sure on a recent feedback from applicants. They said something about, we're not sure where the water's come. Well, we've got an agreement with some ex-person, and there might be a well drilled, and it will be over 50 metres. Well, that's a little bit airy-fairy for me. And 50 metres is still not recognising where are the aquifers, how deep are you going. Now I just need to quickly stop that one and then nip back into that one. Right. So I left you there saying, that yes, we've got lots of threatened species. We've got lots of rare birds and plants. We don't know about the bats and the lizards. I just might add about the lizards. Certainly, McCaskey knows, I think you'll hear from him tomorrow. He certainly told the contractor there were lizards in that Matagauri, and I don't know whether there's any formal, I think that then becomes a matter under the Animal Wildlife Act. Yeah. Anyway, so we're going to go into this picture here. So the top left-hand picture, December 25, that shows near Elizabeth Kelsey's place, shows the stream was drying up and that there was a real strong smell of rotting fish. And on the right here, those are some swirls by potentially eels trying to burrow into the soft mud. And on the left, on the bottom left, that was me going with Makarini Rupeni from ECAN to see what was going on, and his colleague Anna. And that part had dried up. He did see the evidence of the eels. There wasn't mass stranding, so it didn't have to actually do anything, but it was the physical fact of what was going on. And then I went for a walk with Janice uphill, and there were blue herons motoring past to get to the upper pools, have the ancient tapestry there. That's actually, there'll be a close-up of that, but that's another remnant of Matagauri. Oops. Oh, thing. Just people can stand at the side of the road and just look over a couple of paddocks and said, oh, no, it's nothing important there. It's just rank grasses. Well, those rank grasses are full of things like flowers, lots and lots of Mullumbeckia, which we've heard about before. And the Mullumbeckia has the pollen and the nectar that all the lizards have. The lizards are the ones that are protected under law for the what did you say? Wildlife Act. Wildlife Act. Thank you. On the right here is another nationally threatened plant called Carex buchanani, and it's most glorious red colour. In the nurseries, you see this plant, and it's a wee bit boring brown, but in our Weka stream, where it's naturally occurring, they're very fine examples down there. Again, a plant would be under threat, and I took this picture myself down at the confluence of Weka stream and Waipara River of the pied stilt. And I've already mentioned kārearea, the bird, national bird of the year that we can see every day in Waipara when we go for a look-see. This has come in here again, this particular picture here. That pencil line might have been mislabeled elsewhere, but it's a Greenstone Trail major route. That pencil's trying to show where the route is, that little green line. That's what I'm trying to show there. So that line there, I think, is the border of the solar place, and this area here is Janice's and her family's area. This photograph here, the importance of water and mahingakai gathering host, and if you were setting out on a journey to walk to the west coast, you'd probably walk about 16 kilometres a day. Or if you lived at the estuary and you wanted to go and get birds off Maungateri or some inland species from up the Waipara and Weka, you'd again be walking about 16 kilometres. So that's 16, here's the coastline, Kauai River, the Waipara River. Further up, you've got the Huranui. But it's really important just to see that your 16 kilometre mark is around about where the solar complex, 4.8 kilometres worth of it, is placed. And it's a really important cultural heritage spot, and then it goes further over. And I'm just putting here this bottom right-hand picture. These are where the approximate area that John McKeskey will point out to you tomorrow as being where these various stones and artifacts been discovered by him. Right. I've talked on this slide. There are a lot of migrating birds, overhead birds, big ones, fast ones, and then in the streams you've got your wading birds. So what there isn't so much of yet are those hedgerows ones. So it's all very well, and I know in France they've done studies and they say, oh yes, that's a good thing because we're going to benefit because we've got these hedges around the place and there's going to be lots and lots of little birds. Those aren't the kind of birds that are in this particular, or the most birds. Predominant birds are the big overhead flight ones, the ones that are doing major flight migratory things, or their daily search or to the vineyards. There's more falcons because, of course, they prey upon the little birds and there's plenty of food for them. Yes, and of course, all the estuary birds. It's an interesting fact that the South Island pied oystercatcher is now breeding on the Waipara vineyards. So again, they're another one. This is increased numbers, and there's as a result of what's been going on. I'm just I threw this in at the last moment because that piece there is the top, is the solar property, and this is Janice's property, and this terrace and this red bit, these are where the QE2 covenants are along here. And so this is this terrace which continues with these very fragile and important plants that Colin was talking about. Yeah. And this here, during my search to understand the cultural significance of what was going on, 1860 maps, good piece of water shown, good size of water shown. This was why it was important, Mahinga Kai space. And this here is the Weka Creek, and between here and here is exactly where the solar proposal is. But this amount of water was quite robust. There was a lot of waterfowl. That's why the Nohoanga site is down there. Share and nearly there. All right, I just need a moment. I'm looking for that slide that says overall conclusion.
Further down, I think.
I think it's that one, isn't it? Just doesn't have it.
Oh, I need to, something like that.
Sure.
Thank you for your help. Off the top, overall conclusion. The Waipara Valley is an ecologically sensitive, culturally significant and environmentally vulnerable landscape. And I just want to leave you with an idea. So if I had a bowl of fruit, lovely bowl of fruit, and I put a chop in it, or I've got a platter over here, and maybe it's got raw hors d'oeuvres, maybe some roll mops and some oysters and some salmon and some few bits of herbs and a meat platter. And I said, oh, here's a bowl of fruit, you know, with a raw chop on it. Which would you like? Do you like something from here, or shall I give you the platter? You know, this is flat platter. So what I'm thinking is that in some cases we have a space where it's inappropriate to put something on top of it, and not so far away we have a space that might be flat and not with any cultural values. It may not be within 1,000 metres of a watercourse. It may have plenty of shelter. And so we are making choices. And I want to emphasise this point of the fact that we have a bowl. We have the Waipara bowl, and we have all this effort and industry and money and endeavour that has gone into making this bowl a significant scientific project of ecological restoration. So the Waipara Valley is ecologically sensitive, culturally significant, and an environmentally vulnerable landscape. The proposed industrial conflicts with the established biodiversity networks and introduces significant fire and contamination risks. It disrupts viticulture and ecological services. It threatens archaeological and cultural heritage and is inconsistent with the Kaitahu values of environment management. So the environment management, here we have Janice on her land. Here we have these really, really old kowhai trees, easily 200 years old. Here we have a remnant in Janice's Kiwitu space of the Matagauri, and we have the Pū Taki doing their thing, and the blue herons flying overhead. Walking on the land with Ahika Janice, sensing the Maori of the whenua, walking in the footsteps of the very tūpuna, walking of very ancient plants, and with the Pū Taki settling nearby. Right, oh, there. Stop sharing. Share. How do you get rid of those things? Sure, do that. So my thoughts, the scale, the pure scale and nature of the proposal, the thing right in the middle of my bowl, are fundamentally incompatible with the Waipara Basin's ecological, cultural and environmental values. To conclude, kia hora te marino, kia whakapapa pōnamu te moana, kia tere te ka rohi rohi I mua I tō huarahi. May peace be widespread, may the sea glisten like greenstone, and may the shimmer of light guide you on your way. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just ask you, you've made quite a lot of the archaeology and cultural significance across in the site and the impact that the solar farm would have on that in terms of construction and things like that. Would a vineyard have the same impact if you established a vineyard on the same site, on the site?
It's organic.
I think it would have nothing like the same impact. I mean, I know that vineyards do put posts into the grounds. So in that respect, there have been times when people who have made vineyards found artifacts, and in fact, it's quite a common event to find things. But there's not the huge amount of volumes and volumes of roading, bunds, that kind of invasive structure. And the soil itself underneath the panels are not compromised in the same way. They're not compacted.
Yeah, no, I'm just focusing on the culture.
I don't think a vineyard is going to, it's more of an organic nature of horticulture, more surface oriented, and apart from putting in some poles, which in fact I think are only about that deep into the ground. They don't go very deep.
And in terms of that cultural trail?
I think if people who were sensitive to the knowledge of where it is, they would be sensitive to not actually putting a vineyard directly on top of it. They would put the vineyard further up on the secondary terrace, not the first terrace. And indeed, that's what has happened with Elizabeth Kelsey and those vineyard owners. They're on the secondary terrace, not the first terrace. And probably a good reason for that is that it'd be less frosted. Another thing is, I didn't say about the Glenmark fireworks that get cancelled or postponed on many years because of the extreme fire hazard. And that John McCaskey, I know, is going to talk to you tomorrow, and no doubt he will point out that there's an anomaly, a little higher temperature thing going on in that particular part of the world we studied that at university. It's quite a thing, and that was why the vineyards were chosen in the first place to be placed in that area.
Jump in if you want.
You did mention, I think you said that the solar farm would be incompatible with the local character of the valley. I mean, did you hear the evidence of Mr. Bramley yesterday?
No, I didn't.
Right. So he talked about the stream corridor itself having very high ecological value. And he explained because of mainly the fauna rather than the flora. But he said the site itself had very low ecological value because it's been of the history of its clearance, etc. And so he was not concerned about development on the site because it had such low, and that actually the planting that was proposed would be beneficial. What's your take on that?
Oh, my take on that is so we've got a bowl, we've got a valley that is very unique, and it's not in that top Waipara thing. It's very unique. And in this, you've got a stream going up the middle of it. And then you've got all these points of dots of nodes. Now, what happens is that the nodes need to be going this way, not only up the stream. So as far as he was concerned, he was saying quite rightly that there was a corridor, it was a stream corridor, and it's going up and down like this. What we're saying is we've got this whole round basin thing, and we've got vineyards here and we've got vineyards here and horticultural, and those insects, they're not going to be able to cross nearly 5 kilometres from this side to this side.
Right.
So yes, there's a corridor that way, but there's nothing going that way.
So it's the movement of insects that you're worried about in that regard.
It's not just the insects, the birds feed on the insects, so the birds as well. But we also have in the valley a large number, the understanding of a huge amount of money being put into this valley was that there was some legacy and future of ecological benefits going on, and that the wider New Zealand community get to learn about what can happen and what benefits can be. So I'm just losing my train of thought here. So you need the whole range of worms and invertebrates and insects and birds for that beneficial services to actually occur. But it also means that the birds then are important because they're the seed carriers, or the lizards are the pollen carriers. For the lizards to actually transverse across that section of barrier is difficult as well. And that's a whole different section of things. And we don't even know about bats or anything else. But that's the thing. We've got a circle and we've got travel that needs to go this way. And we've got, it's already been mentioned about X number of birds per 100 kilowatts die, and the scientific evidence of how many birds die per X number of kilowatts of energy produced, and it's a lot. So we're not talking about hedge passerines, little hedge birds. We're talking about all the birds that are flying our national kārea there, and the pied oystercatcher and the terns and the special gulls, all those sorts of things that are present in this valley.
Right.
And it's the seed, the pigeons that I mentioned were on the edge of the valley that are moving the seeds.
Yeah.
And the whole point that it's New Zealand clean green image, which is being marketed overseas so that organic growers can sell their wine at $135 a bottle if they so wish. But that is the flagship, if you like, of Canterbury. This is the flagship wine district of Canterbury. Well, we say so. Anyway, but it's got this whole
Milieu.
green image behind it, and to put a 5 kilometre, nearly 5 kilometre, great big red barrier right through the middle of it is just off the scale. It's off the scale. You know,
Right.
It's not the right scale. And when you look around, and you just got to go on Route 72, and you can see a few places, and you think, oh well, that would be a good place for a solar installation. There's no water. There's no science, community, social thing going on. You know, why don't we choose that place instead?
Okay, thank you. That helps me understand where you were coming from. Just a couple of your photos. I noticed there was some planting, I think, that you showed by the school. It was near the fire station, and there was something by the railway station. Are they something that we could easily go and have a look at? Like we're out this afternoon. Can we drive near those?
Yeah, I would say so. I haven't seen, as they say, some of them are 20 years old plantings.
Right.
But yes, if you go down Anzac Street, Colin, am I right? Is there greening? There's still the end of Anzac Street, greening a Waipara planting. Also, if you go to Torless, right, that's where one of the old biodiversity walks is, with a bit of signage.
Okay, you might not leave.
No, we might not leave.
Yeah,
Okay.
well, there's 4 biodiversity official walks that were done there. But what excites me is that I've got friends in the vineyard industry on George's Road, and they and others of along there, they've all been doing their own planting on the terraces and their own, even though they didn't get formal money from the government, they've taken it on, and now they're doing their sustainable wine practice, and they're just changing their whole spray practice regime as a whole community.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, and then there's one last thing. Again, it was a photograph. You showed us a photograph from Mountford Vineyard.
Yes.
Yeah, is it easy to bring that up?
Yep. I'm going to Zoom. Oh, have I lost myself? Now what? Help. Lynn, I might need help.
Can you tell us which document it's on?
No,
Oh, it's on number 2.
number 2, yeah. On page 6.
Do I have to go through? I'm lost again.
Need to go into Zoom. You've logged out of it, I think.
Yeah, we can pull it up.
I've got it.
If you pull it up, I will go and look at it myself. Yeah. Yeah, I can do that. You can see it?
Yeah, I've got it here.
Okay, it's on that one with the picture of the Huronui District Council car. Is that the one you're looking at?
Yeah, you may have it on that. I've got it, just a clean image in your attachment 2 on page 6. But it's a photograph that looks out across the valley from Mountford, I think you said.
Yeah.
I was interested to understand, do you know what all of like this in front of us, there's a white
Yep.
covered area, and then there's quite a few white areas off to the right-hand side.
This means that it's harvest time, coming up to harvest time, and those are the nets being covered by the nets being covered, so that the birds won't get the grapes.
Right.
And what's really interesting is that if you go to the sort of middle right of that picture, that is actually the Weka stream.
Right.
Right there.
Yeah.
Again, you can, What was really nice for me when I was doing that project of being up the top of the hill, and was that I'd met many friends by being a representative for the greening of Waipara and going of biodiversity field person. is that when we were at the top of the mountain there at midnight and the storm was coming and it was really scary and we're looking down into the valley, it's because we'd met so many people in the community who were part of that program. I'd look down into almost one of those spots right there, and you'd see the lights on in the dark, and there'd be thunder and lightning going on, and you'd feel kind of safe because you knew that community.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's all I have.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to me for that time. Thank you.
Okay, we've got a venue change on Monday. Okay, so on Monday, we're going to relocate to the council building. It's just logistics here are difficult. To reset up one day over the week after the weekend. So we're going to relocate now to the council chambers on Monday. So we'll still be here tomorrow, but relocate to the council chambers on Monday. So that's just notice to everyone. We'll get that out on the list. We'll get that out, won't we? Communicate with everyone. Thank you. So just to the applicant and Mr. Akamai, I think it's to you. Can you get us a copy of the Greytown decision, Environment Court decision?
The interim decision?
Yeah, and a copy of the conditions that have been lodged. I know you haven't got a final decision. Can you get a copy of those and send us to? Send it to us, yeah, and she'll forward it on to us. Well, okay, that's adjourned for the day. There's any leftover lunch, we'll circulate it around. We've